Chapter 1233. His father and I are usually too busy to take care of him, causing him to grow slower than other children. His body condition isn't good either. Now, he has to stay in the infirmary most of the time and can't even jog in the morning. I'm worried that something is bothering him and he might not be able to get over it. In the infirmary, Wuxia sat up straight, placing one hand on the steering wheel. Suddenly she did a beautiful drift. She finally understood why she had found the school doctor's scent familiar when he had approached her. It was a drug that was only used when he was soaking corpses. He wasn't an ordinary school doctor. Everything could be explained now. Why had she felt sleepy when they had been chatting? Because Kwang was an expert in hypnosis. However, it was probably because he had spent too much time on her and was interrupted, so he didn't succeed. He had pretended to be the school doctor. On the surface, he had been treating the students. But in reality, everyone was the most defenseless when they were sick. With Kwang's skills, it was a piece of cake to guide the students psychologically at this moment. He should be the person most familiar with the student's condition. He would pick the smartest one and create a group. After that, he wouldn't need to do anything. He just had to watch from the side and the students would start to change. That was why Wuxia felt that this brainwashing gathering was troublesome. You wouldn't be able to tell which of them wasn't affected. Time was crucial. Perhaps he was like this now, but after staying in a group for a long time, he would become another person. Gradually, he would start to habitually invade others and eventually he would become vain. Whoever affected his vanity, he would distort the truth. When everyone became like this, the school wouldn't be able to be saved. How terrifying would a person who was corrupted from the root become after entering society? This would always be a mystery that no one could solve. Wuxia drove at high speed. People were walking on the side of the road, watching a sleek black Lamborghini rush into the school. The guard was dumbfounded. The speed was too fast and he couldn't stop it. Wuxia turned on her Bluetooth earpiece as she walked. I found Kwang. Kwang? Young Master Tang paused. He was smart. He's in school? Emimich, Wuxia replied. You definitely wouldn't expect him to be disguised as a school doctor. I really didn't expect it. No wonder I didn't find any problems even after checking all the teacher's information. After young Master Tang said that, he added, don't act on your own. Wait for backup to arrive. Beep, beep, beep. It was obvious that the youngster had hung up. The man pressed between his eyebrows. Without wasting any time, he immediately contacted the local spies. There were too many people in the school. If there were any dangerous people around, it would cause panic. When the time came, it would be difficult to control the situation. Kwang's biggest danger was that he was good at hypnosis. Perhaps he had already set up a trap without you knowing. It was impossible to tell how many people in the school were under his control. If it was too obvious, it would be easy for the other party to notice. At that time, all the students in the school would become his hostages. Hence, she had to find Kwang without alerting him. Wuxia walked quickly. It was still drizzling, splashing onto her uniform, but she didn't seem to feel it. Her hair was wet and the students who were walking back and forth couldn't help but turn back to take a look. After all, this new transfer student was too handsome. Moreover, they felt that he looked a little familiar, but they just couldn't remember where they had seen him before. Wuxia didn't stop. She reached over and with a swoosh, a military knife appeared from her long sleeves. When she reached the infirmary, she slowed down. After interacting with the Almighty for a long time, she also understood that many psychologists could not only analyze a person's mental state from their expression, but they could even calculate their breathing. Wuxia paused outside for 3 seconds before walking in. At this hour, there weren't many people in the infirmary. Especially on such a gloomy and rainy day, other than the school doctor on duty, no one would be around. But today it was even more deserted. In addition to the hospital bed, there was only the fountain pen on the table. Its owner was nowhere to be found. Wuxia slowed down her footsteps. She turned and pressed her back against the wall. She turned sideways and pulled the curtain open. There wasn't anyone in the lounge. She walked back and forth twice and returned to her original position. She was just about to pick up the form on the table. A voice came from behind him with a chuckle. Which class are you from? Why are you here at this hour? Where do you feel unwell? Wuxia paused, turning her head. Headache, it should be the flu. It's you? As the man spoke, he sat back in his seat and took out a thermometer. Looks like our new school hunk is a little weak. Let's test his temperature first. Wuxia glanced at his refined face, taking the thermometer naturally and placing it in her mouth. The thermometers these days were more advanced and didn't need to be clipped under her arm, preventing her from being exposed. How did you catch a cold? Did you catch a cold wind? After saying that, the man unlocked his phone and a message appeared. It was about the young man standing before him. A contestant from Supreme Alliance? His fingers stilled and then he laughed. When he glanced up, the smile on his face changed. This was the person Fanjia had mentioned, the person Chinamo couldn't let go of? Should he say that she was unlucky or that he was lucky? Even though her hair color was different and her face was slightly different, Kawang never judged a person by their appearance. But Kawang never judged a person by their appearance. That was why he had gotten someone to investigate. He hadn't expected to find such a pleasant surprise. Since she was here, she shouldn't leave. Kawang placed the stethoscope down, a faint smile spreading across his face. He glanced at the time. It's almost time, pass me the thermometer. Bojio handed it over with one hand, her side profile clear and elegant. Kawang chuckled. She was indeed someone who knew how to disguise herself. If he hadn't had an impression of her, her disguise would have been able to fool him. It was impressive for a girl to disguise herself as a youngster without the slightest hint of awkwardness. Was a pity? She had met him. Kawang glanced at the thermometer, his voice still gentle and unguarded. You have a slight fever. Drink some medicine, I'll rush it up for you. 37. 9. Bojio tilted her knife. You really knew how to lie. Thank you, teacher. Bojio sat down. Kawang chuckled lightly. You're welcome. The cold medicine was laced with sleeping ingredients. If she drank it, it would be easier for him to drop the hint. Since she was someone Chinamo placed in his heart, she had to be treated differently. Being betrayed by the person he loved was more painful than knowing Chinmo's true feelings. Kawang raised his hand, shaking the glass in his palm. He lowered his lids and passed the medicine to her. Drink it, once you drink it, you will become my puppet. Fanjia hadn't found out Bojio's true identity. Hence, in Kawang's eyes, she was just a child who overestimated herself. He just had to use his usual methods on her. He hadn't expected what happened next to be completely out of his expectations. The moment the youngster took the glass, she flipped her hand, splashing all the water into his eyes. It happened in an instant. Bojio leaped up, the military knife in her hands pressed against Kawang's neck. When he felt the pain, Kawang narrowed his eyes in shock. But very quickly he calmed down and broke into a light laugh. Not bad, with such speed you must have suspected me long ago. You didn't show any signs of suspicion just now. Even though Chinamo is crippled, it seems like he still has his psychological knowledge. Even the people around him seem smarter than the average person. But do you think you can catch me with your own strength? Seems like Chinamo didn't tell you, don't expose your back. Bojio turned instinctively when she heard Kawang's words. She watched as a person raised a stool and was about to smash her head. She turned swiftly, pressing down on the military knife with one hand. Bojio used her strength and kicked sideways. Bang! That person was kicked to the ground. Kawang made use of the time difference to leave Bojio's range. The person on the ground curled into a ball in pain, shouting, "Teacher, hurry up and leave." It was the girl who had been bullied, Lu Jianing. She grabbed onto Bojio's ankle, her eyes filled with hatred. Tomorrow I'll take the lead and you'll be the clown. Do you know how important it is for me to take the lead? I was appointed by Wang and I was the one who created the group chat. Those who bully me won't have a good time from tomorrow onwards. Everyone will start to worship me again and pay attention to me. But you have to break the rules. You deserve to die, you deserve to die. Bojio lowered her head to meet the girl's eyes. She wasn't human anymore. She had started to rot from the moment she had used feelings as an excuse to hurt him to satisfy her vanity. This had nothing to do with her age. She was selfish. Bojio didn't say a word. She lifted her up and smiled. I'm different from the Almighty, I can hit women. Bang. There was another loud bang. Bojio pushed her away, running towards the direction where Kawang had disappeared without turning back. But it was too late. She glanced over. There wasn't a single person around. Kawang had disappeared. The student's hypnosis was still there. That was the most dangerous part. Chapter 1234. Bojio wore her Bluetooth earpiece and took out the equipment she had prepared. Her first reaction was to lock onto Li Jin's location. There was no response. He was still at home. There was no response from the listening device she had secretly installed on his computer. Did that mean Kawang hadn't contacted him? Could it be that her reasoning was wrong? Bojio shut her eyes. The only thing left in her mind was the calendar she had seen at Li Jin's house. That circle of red. No, her deduction wasn't wrong. There had to be something she hadn't noticed. What exactly was it? Bojio tightened her grip on her phone. Her identity had been exposed and there was no point in hiding anymore. A glint flashed past her eyes as she clicked on the group information. The teacher came over, asking which class she was from and why she wasn't at night revision at this hour. Bojio held onto the railing with one hand and leaped over the field. She jumped down from the 1-meter-high stands, her uniform fluttering in the wind. The teacher. Bojio didn't turn back, using her fastest speed to enter the classroom. At this moment, everyone received Li Jin's message. After finding out that the transfer student had been chosen as the new clown, some were shocked, some frowned, some didn't want to participate and some were excited. Regardless of their emotions, they had to follow the rules. Some of the more straightforward students were the happiest since the youngster was cold and handsome. They were happy to have a chance to embarrass him. It was a good chance for the youngster to know their school's tradition. Everyone was thinking of ways to prank Bojio. Now that the youngster had entered, they glanced at each other. One of them stretched out his leg without a change in expression, wanting to kick Bojio. However, to everyone's surprise, the young man lifted his leg and kicked the stool, sending the person who had stretched out his leg flying back together with the stool. There was a loud bang. Everyone's eyes widened in astonishment. One of the girls who had tried to splash water on Bojio was pinned onto the table. In an instant, the classroom was empty. Everyone watched the scene unfold before them. The youngster's black hair was wet, dripping down her chin. At this moment, the youngster grabbed onto the wrist of the person who had tried to sneak an attack with the baseball bat. Then she exerted strength with her long legs. The person flew out with a bang. The baseball bat landed in the youngster's hand. Bojio didn't restrain herself. With a loud swoosh, she raised the baseball bat and pointed it at everyone who was looking at her. She asked nonchalantly, "Who else wants to play?" No one dared to move. Even though the 5 of them had been hypnotized in the past, none of them dared to rush over. One of them had already been crippled. The other 4 were unsure of the identity of the young man in front of them. Why was he so good at fighting? After all, according to the information they had obtained, this person was quite ordinary. "You're not fighting anymore?" Bojio held the baseball bat, a smile on her face. "I don't like fighting." The 3 who were beaten to the ground were speechless. "Since you're done fighting, let's have a chat." Bojio stood on the podium since it was safer to have a wall behind her. "I heard you have a king here?" No one spoke. Bojio twirled the baseball bat. "Are you happy to be bullied, manipulated, or even controlled? Then you guys are really stupid. When you guys enter society in the future, MLM organizations will probably like you a lot. After all, every scam is accurate." "What did you say?" Some of the girls couldn't stand it. They retorted with a flushed face. "Who do you think you are?" Bojio replied slowly, "I'm no one. I'm not your parent or teacher. I don't have the responsibility to teach you how to be a person." "That's good, I can beat you up whenever I want." "That's great." The girl was speechless for a long time after hearing his words. Someone stood up. It was the class monitor. "You're a guy and you dare to bully a girl?" Bojio laughed lightly. "To me, scum doesn't matter if they're male or female. If you don't like our class, you can leave." The class monitor pushed his spectacles. He laughed coldly. Bojio glanced up at the clock hanging on the wall. "You'll probably be the first to leave." "What do you mean?" Before the squad leader could finish his sentence, the door at the back of the classroom was kicked open. The people who came in were all special forces with their faces covered. When the squad leader saw this, he raised his hand and wanted to grab someone as a hostage. However, the special forces wouldn't give him the chance. It was the same for the other 4. Bojio pointed out all of them. "Take them away." That's right, Bojio's actions were to stall for time and divert the attention of the 5 of them so that they couldn't do anything else. At the same time, Li Jin and Lu Jianing were also arrested. The rest weren't easy to deal with. Even though they knew that there was a case of campus violence, they couldn't do anything about it. Without the victim standing up to speak, it was hard to say anything about this kind of civil matter. Before the students could react, it was over. Before the students could react, it was already over. "Your king will disappear." Bojio didn't leave. She remained at the podium, leaning on the baseball bat, her eyes glistening. "Let me ask you again, do you really like to be used by others?" A girl at the back clenched her fist. "What right do you have to say that king is using us? Because everything you do is harmful to others. Would a good person allow you to do such things?" Bojio glanced up, her gaze deep. "Everyone is selfish, it's in their nature, but don't be so foolish. You are a student, don't you know what a student should do? Study more, at least you can grow some brains. Your parents are paying for you to study, are they for you to show off or to bully others? Do you know what your parents are worried about? They are worried that you won't have enough money to spend, that you won't have face in front of your classmates, and that you will be bullied. It doesn't matter if your conscience has been fed to a dog for that little bit of attention. You even think that you're especially smart. If you're smarter, you should study hard and make yourself more outstanding. You should make more sincere friends in school and play games with your parents when you're bored. There are so many entertainment options out there, but you just have to gather together to create flatulence. Didn't your king tell you that only sneaky rats act like this? Why you? The girl's shoulders trembled. Bojio remained calm, interrupting her. You can't win me in an argument. Chapter 12:35. When the students heard the youngster's last sentence, they couldn't help but want to laugh. You can't beat me in an argument. There was no one else. Ha 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 ha. A round-faced girl laughed out loud, her laughter getting louder and louder. In the end, she stopped laughing and stood up. I don't want to, but I have no choice. Every time I see someone being bullied, I want to stop it, but do you know what the consequences are? I will be the one being ostracized, and I'm afraid. I believe anyone would be afraid since we aren't as strong as you. The girl thought that the youngster would retort back. Unexpectedly, the youngster laughed. Don't forget, you're all in the same class. In my memory, school is like this. No one is allowed to bully the people in our class. If you dare to cross class to cause trouble, I don't care which year you are from or if you're older than me, you have to kneel before me. If I can't beat you, I still have the power of the whole class behind me. We're not together to bully anyone, but to tell everyone that you can't bully us like this. We have to be friendly with each other. Boys protect girls. When it's time for a boy to stand up, a boy shouldn't be a coward. What would it look like for the whole class to bully one person? Who knows, if you stand up and help someone, someone might fall in love with you. Oh right, don't you students like the plot of the hero saving the damsel in distress? If you use it in real life, you can even get rid of the title of bachelor earlier. What do you mean by students? You don't sound like a student. A boy caressed his nose before asking, is it really useful? Bojio replied leisurely, you can ask the girl beside you who is blushing. If you really don't understand, you can read more romance novels to understand a young lady's heart. Of course, a young lady's heart is usually based on looks. With that, the students couldn't help but burst into laughter once more. A few Special Forces soldiers stood outside the door, glancing at each other. In the end, their gazes landed on the silhouette in a suit. Captain, that guy, psychological counseling. We're investigating psychological cases. It's obvious that these students are more or less sick. There might be some hopeless people in this class, but at the same time, there are some people who don't want to be like that. Haven't you noticed that the atmosphere in the classroom is much better than before? The figure walked over with a smirk on his face. It's really rare. I didn't expect to see the cold-blooded and heartless Z giving psychological counseling to a bunch of students. Based on her personality in the past, she would probably only do it and not say anything. Qin Mo's existence really softened her. Special Forces, that guy had crippled 3 people and was still teaching students how to fall in love. Captain, are you sure this is gentleness? Wasn't he just creating trouble for the school? He facepalmed. Perhaps only the figure could understand Bojio's intentions. A conversation could temporarily resolve the crisis that had erupted. In psychology, this was known as the golden time for treatment. Communication happened at the moment. Of course, there would still be such people among the students. The kind of people who clearly knew that their actions were hurting others, but they didn't feel anything. One could tell from their expressions. The reason Kawang could leave so easily was probably because the time was ripe. With just a small catalyst, something would germinate in his heart and he would use the hypnosis to kidnap the hostages. They had to find out the source of the catalyst. If they couldn't solve this problem, everything they had done before would be in vain. There were so many students in the school. Even if only 1 out of 10 of them was hypnotized, the consequences would be unimaginable. Moreover, more than 70% of the students had already changed. The figure was right, that was indeed Kawang's plan. However, he hadn't expected his identity to be recognized by a high school student. If someone hadn't rushed over in time, he would have fallen into the other party's hands. Kawang, who was already in the jeep, narrowed his eyes. His fingers slid across the screen again, the pain from his leg making him smile. He seemed to be enjoying the feeling. If you had died in that school, Chinamo wouldn't be in this state. It's such a pity that such a smart person would be buried with him. Kawang wasn't aware that Li Jin had been arrested. But in his eyes, it didn't matter even if all the chess pieces were arrested. After all, the key to the hypnosis wasn't in their hands. What was meant to happen would happen. No one would be able to detect it and no one would be able to stop it. Unless Chinamo went over. But it was too late. He loved this feeling. The sky had turned completely dark. It was just past midnight, a few hours away from dawn. Kawang leaned back, his refined face tainted by the darkness of the night. In the interrogation room. The headlights were blinding. Li Jin glanced at the youngster sitting opposite him, his gaze wavering. How did you do it? Bo Jio arched a brow. What? It's impossible that you didn't touch my things in my house. How did you restore it to its original state? Li Jin's face was pale and malnourished. No, I should be asking why my mother allowed you in and kept you for so long. How did you do it? Bo Jio placed the documents down. At this stage, Li Jin was more concerned about the questions. Kawang was indeed good at picking people and the other party was smart. It's simple. With an outsider around, your stepfather wouldn't lay a hand on your mother. Bo Jio's words caused Li Jin's expression to change. He tightened his grip on the cup. The people outside the interrogation room were surprised. After all, they had been interrogating Li Jin for 7 hours. They had asked and answered all the questions. Li Jin's emotions hadn't changed from the beginning to the end, saying that he didn't know or wasn't clear no matter what they asked. The scariest thing in an interrogation was this type of criminal. They wouldn't be able to get anything valuable out of him. But he was still young. How could such a young person cause them to feel suffocated? They were at their wits' end. They hadn't expected the youngster to change his expression with just 2 sentences. This was a good thing in an interrogation. At the very least, resistance was a form of leaking information. Chapter 1236. Hearing this, the people in the police station looked at each other. It was obvious that this wasn't a fair exchange. But even so, they couldn't reject him directly. Because in the hands of the other party, there was information related to the safety of the entire school. This wasn't just a small city, even if it was in the entire country, it would be a huge matter. If anything were to happen, none of them would be able to bear the responsibility. Under such circumstances, they could only call for an emergency meeting. The detectives have found some evidence. Li Jin might have some crucial information in his hands. No one knows what will happen if we don't agree to him. If the incident from 3 years ago happens again, the consequences will be unimaginable. But if we agree to his request, we might be releasing a tiger back into the mountains. Can we get someone to follow him? The investigation team has thought of this, but Li Jin is a little sinister. I'm afraid he's up to something. His request to let him off isn't as simple as it seems. He's a smart kid, he's asking us to send him out on camera. That's the only way he'll tell us what the hypnosis Kawang left behind is through text messages. Which means we can't be sure if he will send us the message after he leaves. Yes. The officer in the middle massaged his temples. Let's raise our hands to decide. Let's see if more people agree or disagree. No one moved, no one wanted to make the decision since it wasn't right. Time trickled by. Compared to when he was first brought in, Li Jin had a bigger smile on his face. That kind of smile hanging on his bloodless face would always make people feel uncomfortable from the bottom of their hearts. The more he behaved, the more worried they became. They weren't sure how many students like Li Jin were in the school. They couldn't find out there were too many. Or perhaps some people might look like that on the surface, but deep down they were different. For the first time they felt helpless. It was an indescribable feeling. A police officer leaned against the wall, probably too tired. He tilted his head and lit a cigarette, asking the person beside him, "What do you think happened to the kids these days? Perhaps the environment is different. Go get something to eat, it's going to be dawn in less than 2 hours, I'll watch over them." The police had sent a lot of people to keep an eye on the school, just to prevent any unexpected incidents from happening. Li Jin didn't think much of it and even laughed. Teacher said that when you're handling a case, you like to take precautions. It's useless, no matter what you do, you won't be able to win against teacher. If you don't want to see mass suicides, it's better to follow my instructions. Let me go, I'll give you the information you want. Li Jin's voice could be heard in the meeting room. Everyone's expression changed, thinking anxiously about what they should do. More importantly, they didn't know who had released the news online. They said that they were thinking of ways to rescue a group of students with psychological problems, and for that, they were willing to release the criminals. Soon, the netizens started leaving comments. After seeing what happened to this school, I really can't believe there's such a school. Are the students here normal? This kind of student will harm others if he comes out. To save this kind of person, we have to release criminals. This is not right in itself. It's good that they are gone, I don't understand. That's right, such people should go to hell. The comments online intensified, many of them furious. The special investigation team was already in a terrible predicament and now they had to deal with such things. It was obvious how much pressure they were under. The person in the middle finally made a decision. Inform the subordinates, let. Before he could finish his sentence, a voice rang out in the interrogation room. Suddenly, a voice rang out in the interrogation room, the voice neither loud nor soft, carrying the unique quality of a youngster. Li Jin, let's stop here. You have no idea what kind of hypnosis Kawang has planted in you. This is? The people in the meeting room started to stir. One of them, who hadn't spoken since the start, stood up. Why don't you listen? Someone wanted to stop them, but when he saw the person's face, he swallowed his words. Why was the young master of the Tang family here? In the interrogation room, Li Jin hadn't expected someone to say something like that. He clenched his fists under the table. Why didn't I know? I'm the person the teacher trusts the most here. He left everything to me, even allowing me to use the spies he planted in the class. If you don't want to let him go, just say it. I don't care if I can't get out or not. Li Jin, there's a limit to lying to yourself. Bo Jio walked over, her eyes glistening. I went to your room again just now. You don't seem to know much about hypnosis. Otherwise you wouldn't have such a basic book on it. You and I both know that if the teacher you mentioned cared a little, he wouldn't have left so easily. In his eyes, you are indeed more useful than others since you are intelligent. But regardless of whether a chess piece is useful or not, she is still his wife. For someone like Kawang, he would keep all his secrets to himself. Why would he allow a chess piece to know everything? I'm afraid the only thing you know is that something is going to happen today. Other than that, you don't know anything else. Since you understand your teacher so well, do you know where he is from, what he has been through and what kind of business he does? Li Jin chuckled, his expression starting to look forced. Why should I tell you? Chapter 1237. After hearing Bo Jio's words, the entire conference room became extremely quiet. They wanted to move. But they were interrupted by Li Jin's laughter. It was an abnormal laughter. He pressed both hands on the table, the green in his eyes glaring. You're right, I want them to be afraid. What's the point of them living? What do you know? They destroyed everything I had, don't they deserve to die? I just want to study properly. What have they done? They laugh at me all day long. Don't they think I'm easy to bully? Then they should all go to hell. And you, speaking of which, you should be the same as me. Don't deny it, your scheming is no less than anyone else's. I don't see any intention of saving those people, do I? I heard from Lu Jianing that you almost kicked her to death. It seems like we're the same, those people aren't worth saving. Why do you have to hide your true feelings? The meeting room was in an uproar. Someone was about to stand up. Indeed, there are some people who aren't worth saving. For instance, Lu Jianing, her life has nothing to do with me. But there are many people in school who remain silent because they don't know how to handle such a situation. They want to help you but they aren't strong enough. You have to allow people to protect themselves, that isn't wrong. We are the same in nature but we have different principles. I won't let so many innocent people die just because I want to kill a few pieces of trash. Li Jin looked at the youngster in front of him, slowly returning to his seat, his voice fading. No one has thought of helping me, even my mom would suppress the matter of me being bullied in order to please her current husband. Young masters with parents like you, how would you understand how people like us feel? I attended secondary school overseas, Bo Jio said calmly. Back then foreigners were very anti-Chinese. Besides, I didn't have parents, so many people came looking for trouble. In China, you were at least as tall as them and wouldn't be at a disadvantage in a fight. I was the same as you, I didn't have any friends back then and I didn't have any classmates to stand up for me since I was the only one with black eyes and black hair. But so what? Are you going to soften and call someone daddy just because you're beaten black and blue? Or are you so scared that you become a coward when you see someone stronger than you that you don't even dare to protect your mother? It was very simple to deal with people who ostracized you. If they didn't want to talk to you, then don't talk to them either. Communication was so advanced, who did they think they were? If you're not in the same circle, there's no need to force yourself to fit into the same circle. Bowing and scraping will only make people look down on you more and more. If no one cherishes you, don't tell me you don't cherish yourself? How old were they? Did they still think that life was a fairy tale? The rule of survival is simple. Here. Bo Jio reached her hand out, tapping his spine. You have to stay straight no matter what. Li Jin couldn't describe the feeling. Chapter 1238. Li Jin's words were too late. Everyone's heart sank. Bo Jio was probably the calmest. That was because Li Jin was right, they were the same. Those who hadn't experienced those things wouldn't understand what it meant to be alone and helpless. When injustice was done to us, they would always think that the law was too far away and the fist was too close. It wasn't that they hadn't thought of resistance, but the resistance would be drowned out by other voices. Those who committed crimes shared the same traits, they were vain and would distort the truth. This had nothing to do with age and wasn't a dark side, they were just like that. Those who clamor that I am but what I have done are merely exculpating themselves of guilt. When they met such shameless people, it was important to know how to react. That was the most important thing to do when they met such shameless people. Similarly, they shouldn't be filled with hatred. You could try to become stronger or even look at yourself in the mirror to see if there was anything you needed to improve, be it your personality, the way you spoke, or sometimes, your heart was just too weak. When you met with difficulties, you couldn't blame it on the circumstances. The kind of life you wanted to live depended on whether you were working hard. Bojo knew that even now, there would still be people in that school who didn't think much of what they had done. But at the same time, Bojo knew other than them, there were many others who didn't know what they were doing. For a long time, she wasn't sure what she was doing, she had even forgotten what her father had said. She thought, there would always be someone in this world who would pull you up when you fell into the endless darkness. If no one was willing to be that person, what would happen in the future? Bojo was a person who wandered in the darkness, just a figure. When he gradually became clear, you would understand that there were things you had to do. Even if there was a 0.1% chance that this kindness would be repaid to that person. I never believed that the world was bright, but I believe that I can create light. These were the last words she left Li Jin. Everyone is the same. As they walked out of the interrogation room, every minute became more and more pressing. There wasn't any valuable information from Li Jin. The only news in the meeting room was the one Bojo had provided. The youngster believed that Kwang's hypnosis would be activated today, but there wasn't any evidence as to how it would be activated. What was even more unbelievable was that it was Li Jin's intuition. No one could understand why the young man would believe a criminal's intuition. Alright, even if we all believe it, what should we do next? Tell every parent to keep an eye on their children? Someone rubbed his temples. That's not realistic, there are too many students in the school and some of their parents aren't even in the city. Even if they are, we don't know how Kwang would activate them. If the news were to spread, it would only cause a greater impact. The more unsettled the students are, the more unstable their mental states would be. By then, the situation would only worsen, and who would be responsible for it? Bojo laughed, a hint of mockery in her voice. In the end, you're just afraid of taking responsibility? You. That person's expression changed. Let me. The person sitting in the middle said, I'll bear all the responsibility as long as I can save them. But this isn't the time to agitate them. Child, you should know that announcing the news isn't a good idea. Indeed, it would only make the danger more uncontrollable. Bojo stood up. I'll look for more information. Up until now, this was the only way. The clock hung on the wall pointed to 6 a.m. On this day, no one slept. The examiners flipped through the information over and over again. There were even specialized people observing the students to see if there were any differences. Everything was normal. Even a psychiatrist couldn't tell the difference. From 6 a.m. to 7:30 a.m., all the students had finished their breakfast. The day students had also arrived at the school gate at this time. Of course, there were students who were late. But no matter how one looked at it, the school seemed to be thriving. How could anything have happened? Could he have made a mistake and it isn't today? In the camouflaged nanny van, one of the officers nudged his colleague's arm, lowering his voice as he gestured for him to look at the youngster in the passenger seat. The youngster was holding onto an iPad, the images of Li Jin's interview and the occasional images of the school doctor. Kwang was meticulous and it was obvious. There weren't many images of him on the iPad, all of them from afar. Outside the car window, the sound of the students fighting could be heard through the wind. Indeed, there wasn't a single trace of abnormality. Was she thinking too much? Bojo shut her eyes. She wasn't sure if it was because she had stayed up late for the past 2 days, but her nose was stuffy and her head was dizzy. She was slightly tired. Her thoughts were heavy. Faintly, she dreamt of the time when she was at home. He had tilted his head and explained physics to her. You can apply the formula to any question as long as you use it flexibly. In that case, she replied lazily. After all, she wasn't interested in physics, she was only interested in people. There are so many questions, I'm getting dizzy. He held the side of his face and slapped her forehead. No matter how complicated the description of the question is, you just need to remember one thing. Figure out the real intention of the person who came up with the question. The rest of the description is just a smokescreen, idiot. Beep beep beep. The ear-piercing sound of a car engine could be heard. All of a sudden, Bojio opened her eyes. We seem to be blocking someone's car. It's 8:10 p.m. The students should be in by now. Let's move the car. Bojio listened to the noise, her head still heavy and her breathing became difficult. She tilted her head up and drank a mouthful of mineral water. That was when she remembered that her body wasn't healthy. Fortunately, she could handle it. The water flowed down her throat, making her feel better. Bojio glanced out of the car window. The bustling school entrance was now empty and the guards were closing the doors. She wasn't sure if it was the influence of the dream. Bojio tapped on Li Jin's recording again, the sentence still lingering in her mind. Understand the intention of the person who came up with the question. Suddenly Bojio paused on the mass suicide that Li Jin had mentioned. No, that wasn't right. That wasn't Kwang's true intention. Kwang wanted hostages to rush towards him so that he could be safe. Mass. Chapter 1239. Swoosh. Bojio reached out to pull the car door open and jumped out. She only said, "Follow me." Her sudden action caused the driver to break out in cold sweat. He was just about to board the train. The people at the back glanced at each other before pulling the car door open. They gritted their teeth as they ran. The conference room was connected to the commotion. When someone heard the commotion, he straightened. What's wrong? We don't know either. That youngster suddenly jumped out of the car. The guard didn't understand what Bojio was thinking. At this moment, the railing at the school gate was lowered. Bojio didn't hesitate. She held onto the railing with one hand and leaped over. She was still wearing her school uniform. As soon as the guard's voice rang out, he saw two people behind the young man leaping in as well. The key point was that they raised their IDs. The guard was stunned. What was going on? There was a broadcast in the school. The general content was for the students to take their stools and take their seats according to the formation of each class. The sound got softer and softer. It seemed like it had been arranged. Bojio's speed doubled once more. Because of the word, large scale. Even though the hypnosis could be activated at any time. But if it was large scale, the entire school would be watching the movie today. What Kwang wanted wasn't to trigger the hypnosis individually. If that was the case, any time would be fine. Once the hostages were gone, they would lose their value. In a large-scale riot and stampede, even if there were guards around, they wouldn't be able to stop a portion of the students from jumping into the car and leaving after receiving the hypnosis. Their actions would be large-scale. If everyone ran in the same direction, even if they were running towards the criminals, they wouldn't be able to open fire. That was Kwang's motive. He wanted everyone to know that they would be holding this batch of hostages outside the border. This way, once everyone knew about it, regardless of who was going to take action, they would have to rescue these hostages because they were still children. And the only way to stop all of this was to cut off the broadcast. Bojio ran towards the sound. At this moment, the sound of the movie entering could be heard. In the distance, the projection teacher watched in confusion as a student ran over. He frowned, thinking that it was someone from another class who was late. Bojio glanced over. No matter how fast she was, it would take at least a minute to reach the broadcast location. It was too late. If he ran over, it would indeed be too late. Moreover, the teachers in charge of maintaining order were already walking towards her. Because of this, people didn't even notice the frequent small movements of the students when they saw the scenes and sounds played in the movie. Those actions were really normal and there was nothing bad about the movie. But everything reminded her of the most famous hypnosis case. In the beginning, when the audience listened to the drumming, they only felt that their emotions were higher than usual, and they would make some small movements from time to time. However, as time went on, they became more and more uncontrollable, to the point that no one knew why these people became restless in the end and wanted to escape from the scene, resulting in a sudden large-scale stampede. Chapter 1240. This student, the physical education teacher, walked over with his hands on his waist. He probably wanted her to return to her seat. In a crowded place, the airflow wouldn't be high. No one expected Bojio to stop. She raised her hand to put on her mask. Then she glanced up, the military dagger in her hand unsheathing with a swoosh. It flew straight towards a tree next to the screen. That was the main switch that controlled all the electricity. The volume of the video was very loud. Other than a portion of the teachers, no other students noticed this scene. The only thing they could feel was, after the sound of "pa," the screen turned black and the sound stopped. Their thoughts seemed to have been pulled back from somewhere. All the students blinked, then turn their heads to talk to the people next to them. What's going on? Is there a power outage? I'm not sure, could it be a power outage? In that instant, the field was in an uproar. Some of the students stood up to check on the situation, some lowered their heads to play games, some turned back to ask for snacks from their roommates. Even though the discipline wasn't that strict, fortunately, nothing terrible had happened. They remained in their original positions. Some of them might have been confused about why they had been so angry a moment ago, but now that the feeling had disappeared, they rubbed their chests in confusion. On the other side, the physical education teacher was about to break down. He shouted loudly, "You little brat! Do you know what you have done, Aishi?" It wasn't easy for him to be in charge of the school's video broadcast. He had made such a huge mistake. His internship period was going to be extended. Seriously? The physical education teacher raised his arms, grabbing his hair in anger. Bojio laughed. This kind of teacher was undoubtedly cute in her eyes. In reality, regardless of the occupation, there would be good and bad people. Some people in the education system would do anything to earn money. But similarly, there were some people who became teachers because they hoped to become good teachers. Hence, they often thought about how to interact with the children of this era and how to help them develop in a better direction. The Almighty was right. Everyone's eyes were the same. It depended on what you were looking for. But cutting off the electricity in public was a challenge to the school's authority. The Dean of Academic Affairs walked over and was about to speak. The two plainclothes officers rushed over, one hand on their knees while the other raised their identification documents, panting heavily. This is our colleague." The dean's eyes widened. This kid was obviously wearing their school uniform and she was so young. How could she be from the police? There's something wrong with the video. How many of these videos are there in the school? Destroy all of them and ban them from being shown in the future. I'll bring the sample back. From a certain perspective, Bojio wasn't willing to be associated with the police. What a joke, she was in the underworld, why would she be friendly with her natural enemy? There's something wrong with the film? The teacher in charge of the screening was dumbfounded. What problem could there be with the movie? It was all normal. There was nothing like 18K. How could there be a problem? The two guards were also a little embarrassed. After all, there was nothing wrong with the contents of the films. Chapter 1241. The guard tugged Bojio's sleeves. "Are you sure it's a problem with the film?" "I'm sure." Bojio's tone was calm. "Disperse the students and get them to return to their classrooms. Also, get someone to get a psychiatrist to do a test." The guard didn't say anything else since his superiors had instructed him to listen to the youngster. Even though they didn't know where he had come from, this was the best they could do given the current situation. The school would be able to cooperate with them if they explained. Actually, the students had their own thoughts. It wasn't as if they hadn't seen the news online. It was just a different reaction. Some of them felt that Li Jin was a toad. They were giving him face by teaching him a lesson. What was he going to do to them? Some of them were scared to death since some of them wanted to join in the fun. They wanted to be more friendly in the future. Some of them wore their headphones and closed their eyes. They told themselves that they wouldn't bully anyone in the future and that they would be the one to stand out when they could. It was just that no one knew that the danger had already been resolved without them even knowing. The film was brought to the meeting room. Bojio and the other three famous psychologists were present. In the end, they came to a unanimous conclusion. The film was indeed fine. If the target group was the students, then there would be a huge problem. After all, they already had the previous setting. Bullying and being bullied. Ostracization, vanity, attention. That's all they wanted. That was the problem. Firstly, there was an image that stimulated one's perception. It was very simple. Everyone would have a different view of this matter when they looked at it. Based on your personality, you would be able to relate to it. They played the video for Lu Jianing to watch. In less than 3 minutes, she became very violent. After all, they were born to compare and wanted to get attention. If you provoked them, they would have a very strong backlash. That wasn't all. The sound of the film seemed normal, but if you listened to it separately, you would realize that the sound effects were extremely rushed. It was easy to trigger people's emotions. If it hadn't been interrupted in time, the consequences would have been unimaginable. They came to a conclusion. The three psychologists were also shocked. Everyone who studied criminal psychology would know about the case from abroad. However, such cases were not common. How could that child be so young? How did he know? Just as the three psychologists were about to question someone, they realized that the youngster was no longer in the conference room. The safety of the students was finally secured. After the hypnosis was removed, the local psychological agency would find some students to talk to. Those who had been violent and humiliating others but still felt that they had done nothing wrong would go through the legal process and be sent to the juvenile detention center. Some people said that it was too strict. Anyway, the matter had passed. They were just some children. What did they know? First of all, those who are over 10 years old and do not have a sense of right and wrong should not call themselves children. At the very least, the 5-year-old babies would express their dissatisfaction. Furthermore, no matter how small it was not an excuse for them to feel that it was okay to hurt someone. Moreover, this wasn't simply being ignorant. They were enjoying forming a gang to seize, possess, and bully others. It was time for these people to receive their just desserts. No one was born a murderer. It was just that he didn't care this time and he didn't care next time. Over time, some things would become more and more unscrupulous. Those who said that the matter was over were probably kind-hearted and had good intentions. But sometimes ignorant kindness would only help the murderer to form. It wasn't a big deal to teach them a lesson when they made a mistake. When they thought about the people they had bullied, everything would be fair. But for such a huge case to be solved, someone had to make a big contribution. Who would have thought that the youngster would disappear that afternoon? At this moment, Bojio was hunching her back. She pulled off her jacket and threw away her school uniform. She changed into a black suit. Her figure was so straight that it was impossible to tell how she looked like before. She faced the car window and twisted the tie on her shirt. Her hair fell down, completely displaying the advantage of her face. Bojio was dressed this way because she had received a voice message from young Master Qin. "I have good news for you, treat it as a reward for your work." The informant in the MT region sent news. Actually, even if you hadn't appeared, Kawang would have gone back yesterday because he had to meet a very rich Chinese man. I heard that the Chinese man is very extravagant. The moment he arrived in Country T, he bought a huge cruise ship and a huge batch of firearms to protect himself. He wanted to buy good goods locally. Of course, the Chinese man's identity isn't clear. What we know is that he's a rich second-generation heir with a powerful family background. He also has a very capable investment consultant by his side. So here's the question, who do you think he is? Was there a need to guess? Such a nouveau riche, it couldn't be anyone else other than Prince. As for the extremely capable investment consultant, it should be the Almighty. After all, the Almighty's abstinence didn't seem out of place at all. Bojio raised her hand to buckle the sensor watch. Her eyes seemed to be glowing as she entered the Lamborghini. She closed the door casually and entered a few words on the navigation system. A voice notification floated over. The specific address has been confirmed. The entire journey is 800 miles and there is sufficient fuel. Let's go. Bojio turned the steering wheel with one hand and did a beautiful drift. At this moment, she didn't look like the student she had been before. She was a rich playboy, but because of her suit, she carried a hint of business aura. "Master, your heartbeat is too fast. Are you so happy because there's news of the Demon King?" Bojio nodded. "Master, your heartbeat is too fast. Is there news of the Demon King?" "Little Blackie, I realize that even though most of the time your intelligence isn't enough, you're pretty smart this time." Bojio increased the speed of the car, unable to suppress the smile on her face. "Not bad. Little Blackie." It didn't feel like it was being complimented. It felt as though it was being forced to swallow a bowl of dog food. Life wasn't going to be easy. If they really met the devil, they wouldn't be receiving and kissing in the car, would they? The moment little Blackie imagined the scene, the headlights started to flicker. Chapter 1242. In the cruise ship. The sudden ringing of the phone. This caused the few people who were training to stop their movements one after another. Qin Mo glanced at the boss on the surface. "Answer it." Prince glanced at the caller ID, waiting for the people beside him to put on their earphones before answering. "Hello." "Hello." It was Scorpion's number, but at this moment, the voice changed. "I heard that you are interested in doing business with me." Prince maintained his carefree persona. "Who are you?" "Kawang." The moment the two words came out, Prince stiffened. Prince froze, his expression changing in an instant. "What? Don't you know me?" Kawang seemed to be guessing his thoughts all the time. That was the reason he gave off such an oppressive aura. Prince listened to the voice beside his ear. Unknowingly, he felt a chill at the back of his neck. If his boss hadn't been sitting in front of him, tapping the table, he probably wouldn't have known how to reply. "Of course I know you." Prince smiled. "I've heard many legends about this title in the MT region. However, I'm most interested in how many good items you have." Kawang didn't come to a conclusion. He glanced down at the crippled person and took the handkerchief from the person beside him. He wiped the blood off his fingers, not saying a word. Instead, he turned around and shook his finger. Only an "ah" sound could be heard. The scream of pain shocked not only Prince but also Magician and the others. Their fingers froze. Chinamo was the only one who didn't move. He just sat there, his face elegant, as though he wouldn't be surprised no matter what he heard. At this moment, Kwang chuckled. "I'm really sorry, I just settled some internal matters and caused a commotion. I had no choice, there are always people trying to sneak in. This time it was the special forces from China. They thought I wouldn't be able to find them, it's really—" Kwang didn't finish his sentence. But through that painful scream, Prince could imagine what it was like on the other side. He couldn't control himself, clenching his fists. Magician gritted his teeth as well. Everyone was furious, including Wolf, who had always been indifferent. Prince couldn't take it anymore. He tilted his head, his breathing rising. Chinamo was one step ahead of him, reaching out to block the microphone. The deepness in his eyes was like a calming stone, allowing Prince to adjust himself. Then he smiled. "Is he really a fool? They've always been like this. I caught a few of them and threw them into the high seas to feed the fish." Kwang's voice was gentle. "I didn't expect us to have the same thoughts in this aspect. But my way of handling things is slightly different from yours. I won't feed them to the sea. The injured ones will be more useful as hostages. Do you think the Wuxia Special Forces will think of a way to save their comrades?" Prince's fingers tightened, but he had to maintain the image of a nouveau riche. "Who cares if they come to save us? That's your concern. I only care if I can earn money." Chapter 1243. I will send the address to Your Excellency's mobile phone later, and someone will bring Your Excellency here to inspect the goods. Remember to prepare the first deposit, Your Excellency. With that, Kwang hung up the phone. He was still wearing his white coat as he glanced at the computer screen and the subsequent reports. What he had planned hadn't happened. The important chess piece that should have called him at this time seemed to have gone missing. The large-scale trampling incident he had wanted to see was like a mist. It hadn't even appeared. What did this mean? Kwang knew it clearly. This meant that none of the hostages he had found would appear. The students hadn't come to the border. The off-road vehicle he had prepared had lost its purpose. At the start, Kwang had assumed that China was trying to calm the public, suppressing the news and not reporting it. But after he had received the news, he realized that someone had ruined his plans. Someone had ruined everything he had prepared for such a long time. Kwang's gaze gradually turned cold. His eyes were like a snake's, filled with a sinister aura. The sun in the MT region had always been bright. But no matter how bright the sun was, Scorpion could feel the anger emanating from the person in front of him. Bang! Kwang raised his gun, turning to shoot a bullet at one of the informants. Then he smiled. I never expected the person Chinamo fancied to be so capable. But it doesn't matter, it's all thanks to him that we managed to obtain such useful information. With that, he hefted the communication device in his hand. Anyone who contacted the outside world would leave a record. He had purposely asked Fanjia to lower her standards. He hadn't expected to catch a rat. He wasn't sure who the message was sent to. But he was very interested in the contents. After all, the Chinese businessman had been mentioned. It seemed like the other party was very concerned about his business. Didn't this mean that there was something wrong with this group of people? Kwang's heart sank. He ordered his men to capture the person who had spread the news for the Chinese businessman. With one look he understood. Even though the person had denied colluding with anyone before his death, Kwang didn't believe him. Of course he couldn't deny that the Chinese businessman was real. But if the other party was fake, Chinamo might be inside. Kwang smiled, reaching out to wipe away the blood at the corner of his lips. If Chinamo really existed, the exchange of information was extremely valuable. That's right, losing the student hostage was equivalent to losing half of the initiative. However, there was one thing that he had an absolute advantage over. He had already discovered the other party's identity, but the other party was still immersed in joy, thinking that everything was going smoothly. Kwang walked over to the table looking at the image on the screen. Suddenly he broke into a smile. Compared to those students, you are the most valuable hostage. It's a pity I didn't manage to kidnap you back, but when Chinamo comes, any news about you would be enough to turn him into a different person. Speaking of which, I have to thank you for letting me discover you in school. Fanjia didn't speak because she couldn't be more familiar with that image. She had been looking for this person for such a long time, but she did not expect that her master would be the first one to meet her. This was like a slap to her face. Go and make a video. Kawang's voice was calm, he seemed to have finally adjusted his emotions. Wearing his white coat, he walked towards the computer screen. Use this footage and make some changes to the content. It's time for China Mo to have a second taste of what it feels like to lose something. If the Chinese businessman is really him, your video will come in handy. He didn't need to explain it clearly, Fan Jia understood her master's intentions in the next second. Back then she had pretended to be his childhood playmate to get close to him. She hadn't expected him to see through her in less than 10 days. But even so, they knew what his weakness was. They had to find that line of defense and destroy it completely, planting a psychological cue. Now, her master was probably going to reactivate that psychological cue. If that was the case, that person's personality would change drastically and he would become one of them. With that thought, Fan Jia couldn't suppress the smile on her face, her eyes glistening. I'll go and prepare now. On the cruise, after hanging up the phone, Prince kicked the chair in front of him away, his eyes filled with depression. Almost everyone present understood that feeling. Another comrade had been captured. He didn't even need to think to know what kind of cruel treatment he would receive from Kawang. It was impossible not to be furious. Right now, everyone was thinking about capturing that thug, Kawang, so that he wouldn't be able to do as he pleased in this world. There was only one person sitting on the chair, his long fingers tapping on the table as he listened to the recording of the phone call. After the third time he removed his earphones, standing tall and handsome. Kawang is setting a trap for you, every sentence is a test. From another angle, there is a problem, he is suspecting our identity and you almost exposed yourself. Prince stilled, his eyes widening. He hadn't expected it to be so serious. He knew that Kawang was purposely provoking him, but he hadn't thought much about it. Now that he had heard Qin Mo's words, Prince felt sweat dripping down his forehead. Kawang was more unpredictable than they had imagined. If Kawang is really suspecting our identity, boss, are we still going for the deal? Magician felt uneasy. Qin Mo stood up. Don't forget what the mission is, it's normal for us to be suspected. Kawang is a suspicious person and no one would immediately believe a Chinese person who has just entered the industry. Report the situation to the higher-ups. Fatty, check which special forces unit the captured soldiers belong to and which tourists are the hostages. We'll see how we can save them. Yes. The few of them split up, getting to work. The moment China received Qin Mo's news, they called for a meeting immediately. The atmosphere was tense. Whether to take action or not was a difficult decision to make. There were too many times when a decision had to be made and it had to be made. If they hadn't received the news previously, they could have taken it as the Chinese tourists had all been massacred. But now they received the news. Kawang still had 17 ordinary tourists in his hands. The relatives of these tourists were all hoping for their return. They couldn't ignore such hopes. But at the same time, even though they knew Kawang was suspicious of Qin Mo and the others, they still sent the children to carry out the mission. They couldn't bear to do it. They were the top special forces in China. Their average age wasn't even 25 years old. Everyone knew that this was a mission that they might not be able to return from. General Qin wasn't the only one in the meeting. It was too difficult for them to make a decision. Indeed, it was too difficult. But all the spies had fallen. Now only this team was left. They were the closest to Kawang's lair. If they were fully prepared, they would be able to break the stalemate and lock onto Kawang's exact location. With the video evidence and the tourists still alive, they would be able to mobilize the foreign troops. But all of this required someone to go against Kawang. Otherwise, no one could be sure if the 17 tourists, including the spies that Kawang had captured, would still be alive. This was the situation everyone understood. At the same time, Bojio received 2 voice messages from young Master Tang. At this moment, Bojio was 500 kilometers away from the border. She drove the Lamborghini very fast, even exceeding the speed limit. Her eyes were unprecedentedly dark. Bojio was clear that even without this meeting, that person would have made the decision to save them. It was because of the clothes he was wearing. More importantly, he had said that the soldiers of China were born to save people. Little Blackie. Bojio turned and ordered, "Help me get Hoshino's call." "Yes, master." The navigation system changed and the internet connected automatically. The video wasn't a road map anymore. Instead, it was directed to a computer. The next moment, Hoshino's handsome face with a faint smile appeared in front of Bojio's eyes. He seemed to have just finished training. He was in his esports uniform and there was a black earpiece on his ear. Bojio was used to seeing him in a sweater. Now that he had changed, it gave her a faint glow. It's rare that you would send me a video call directly. Hoshino, I need you to help me investigate a place. Bojio tilted her head. Her eyes were bright. Use the power of the entire hacker world. Hoshino paused. Then he smiled. I understand. I'm the only one here. The access is limited. Now, connect to the regional network. Is it okay for me to log in with your account? It's okay. Bojio was straightforward. Hoshino's gaze turned warm. When Yusishin pushed the door open, this was the scene he saw. He didn't need to think to know who he was talking to. But Hoshino actually gestured for him to leave. Yusishin tied up his long hair. His sharp handsomeness made him exude a sense of coldness. Then he slammed the door. He didn't even want the cake he had bought. His long legs stepped on the pure black battle axe. The manager behind Yusishin was a little cautious. Young master, what's wrong? Isn't young master Hoshino around? Why isn't he around? He's kissing his lover. He probably doesn't have time to care about you. What? Do you want to test my driving skills? When Yusishin said this, the corners of his eyes turned cold. Such a man could really make people feel scared. The manager remembered the person who wanted to touch young master's car. He broke one of his ribs. He hurriedly waved his hands. No, I'm just asking. Who did he offend? He felt so wronged. Yusishin didn't say anything. He glanced at the cake box that he had thrown. The more he looked at it, the more irritating he felt. He stepped on the accelerator. He was arrogant like a ball of fire. He didn't know who he would burn. Only young Master Hoshino could make the prince of the underworld reveal his emotions. The manager sighed. He didn't dare to ask why. Upstairs, Hoshino had already opened his laptop. Basically, as long as he had the young lord's instructions, it would be very easy to investigate a place. But the place they wanted to investigate today wasn't so easy to find. Because it was in the MT area, the ungoverned area of the Golden Triangle, everything became very complicated. First of all, this place wasn't developed. In addition, it was surrounded by dense forests. This meant that the communication here wasn't developed. In a place where communication wasn't developed, the internet wasn't widespread. To a hacker, in order to infiltrate a place, they had to have a network first. That way it would be easier for them to operate. But here, because the network signal was too weak, in order to infiltrate, they had to find a suitable route. A few simple hackers definitely wouldn't be able to do it. But Bojio had said that they had to gather the power of the entire hacker world. This meant that this infiltration wasn't limited to one type of network. As long as there was a route, they would be able to infiltrate. But they still needed time, and it would take a long time. No one was sure if they would be able to find the place before their young lord arrived. Hoshino replied this question to Bojio. The next second, Bojio gave a solution. Try to start from the network operator. Starting from the network operator meant that as long as there was a signal, regardless of whether it was the main flow network or not, it would be detected. Many people said that hackers relied on their coding ability and hacking skills. That was indeed true. But there was another point that people often neglected. That was the thought process to infiltrate. A correct thought process to infiltrate could save a lot of time. And to a hacker, time was the deciding factor. With Bojio's thought process, hackers from all over the world quickly integrated the information and deleted it. In the end, it landed on a region. This region was west of the Mekong River. It was the largest natural forest. The last piece of information regarding Kawang had come from this place. Chapter 1244. Unless someone can destroy the signal interference equipment, Bojio interrupted Hoshino. She turned the steering wheel with one hand, her eyes as dark as the night sky. Hoshino, thank you. When he heard the last few words, Hoshino knew Bojio's decision. Similarly, he knew that as an assistant he had to prepare everything. I will get someone to prepare the equipment for you before you enter the forest. But that place has always been heavily guarded. Our spies won't stay there for long. You will have to go to the designated location to get it. As Hoshino spoke, he had already entered the regional network. The hacker aristocrat clan sounded simple. But in reality, when you got to know them, you would realize that they never lacked manpower. This was arranged by the old steward. As long as there were people, there would be a supply point. This was the rule of the underworld. Any organization would obtain the information they needed from the hacker aristocrat clan. Correspondingly, they had to provide a certain level of protection. Of course, they wouldn't care about life and death, but they would always be conservative when it came to equipment. This was an unspoken understanding. In the past, there had been people who felt that the hacker aristocrat clan was just impressive on the internet. They were probably useless in real life. They wanted to break the rules and not provide the equipment needed to end the hacker aristocrat clan. Such an organization disappeared in front of everyone's eyes in less than a week. The hacker aristocrat clan sold information, but that didn't mean that they were weak. Everyone knew what kind of person the young lord of the hacker aristocrat was. Unless they had no other choice, they would never offend Z. After all, everyone helping each other out was what everyone in the underworld wanted to see. This was the same in the MT region. Just as Bojio drove towards the direction of the forest, the Supreme Council had made a decision and the operation continued. This was Qin Mo's suggestion, because he knew very well what the current situation was. Perhaps every Special Forces soldier had been prepared for this from the very beginning. Regardless of what awaited them in front of them, they had to learn how to overcome it. If the mission was too dangerous, they wouldn't go for the rescue. That would probably go against the original intention of wearing this uniform. Qin Mo lifted his lids and looked at his soldier. None of them had any intention of not going. When they had heard that Kawang had Chinese compatriots, their first reaction had been to think of a way to save them. Qin Mo used a pen to draw an area on the map. According to the analysis of the information, Kawang would usually choose his old nest for a deal. The most important thing now is that no one knows the exact location of Kawang's old nest. Hence, we need to stall for time during the negotiation. The signal can't be detected? Fatty frowned. How are we going to retreat? Chapter 1245. He wanted him to show his fear towards the Devil King? Prince thought that it was too easy. However, he had never thought that he would have such an elder brother. Prince tried to put himself in the role of the little black boy. He felt that his boss might be strict, but at least he doted on his younger brother. Hence, he should be able to do whatever he wanted to. But reality proved that Prince was too naive. Just as he was about to give the devil a hug to show his brother's happiness, his boss glanced over. Boss glanced over with a cold gaze that made one's scalp numb. There's no need for physical contact. Prince glared. Then how are we going to show our brotherly love? I'll suppress you harshly. It's a sign of brotherhood, Qin Mo replied slowly. Prince? He had been living in his fantasy for one more minute. His boss wasn't like this when he was with the little black boy. He would bring him water or carry sweets in his pocket. He would smile and pat his head whenever they didn't agree. Why was he suppressing him harshly? Check your belongings. Qin Mo glanced over, his long fingers tapping on the table. According to Kawang's personality, he won't let us reach our destination directly. From the map, we have to take a boat first. Before that, we will have to alight from our own car and be blindfolded. Our belongings might be detected. Hence, we have to be careful and change all internal communication devices to watches. Wear a coat, especially the one Prince is wearing. Magician, from today onwards you will have a habit. Magician was still in a daze. Qin Mo had already prepared a poker card for him. You play poker all the time. Magic should be easy for you. Magician glanced at the ace of hearts in his hand. He understood what his boss meant. Poker cards could be used as a hidden weapon. He couldn't bring a fully formed weapon. He could only bring something unexpected and defensive. Fatty, you will be in charge of tracking. Once we meet up with Kawang's men, you can't follow anymore. Remember to lock onto our location and maintain a 24-hour link with the troops. Yes. Qin Mo's words could be heard from the conference room. There were still 3 hours before the meeting time Kawang had said. They could only make sufficient preparations within a limited time. Kawang was already suspicious of them, and the moment they moved time, his suspicions would only increase. Therefore, this operation more or less depended on luck. In terms of disguise, there was no need to worry. Magician's makeup skills were on par with Bojio's. In less than half an hour, Qin Mo's face had undergone a drastic change. He didn't look like he used to. Instead, he looked more like young Master Qin. However, he looked more imposing. He had a short beard on his face and looked very manly. Coupled with the knife scar at the corner of his eye, he didn't look like young Master Qin anymore. In addition, Qin Mo's natural aura made Prince feel that his boss had entered the wrong profession. He seemed more like a big boss than a gangster. At the starting point, the hour hand pointed to 3. Chapter 1246. Prince paused for a moment. Qin Mo glanced up, gesturing for him to pick up the call. Prince pressed the answer button. Kawang's laughter could be heard. He sounded extremely refined. I'm really sorry, I received news that someone leaked our meeting location. I'm investigating what exactly went wrong. Leaked? How was that possible? Prince instinctively wanted to deny it. Qin Imo moved his fingers, indicating for him to cancel today's meeting. Cancel. Prince thought he had misread the gesture, but when he glanced at his boss's face, he knew what to say. But when she looked at her boss's face again, she knew what to say. Since there's a problem, let's not meet up for now. Find out who leaked the news and kill them. I have so many connections here. If someone finds out that my family met up with you, I'll be the one in trouble. My brother definitely won't forgive me. He's beside me right now. He was just scolding me, saying that I don't have a brain. You're being too serious. Don't worry, as long as you don't leak the information, everything will be safe. Kawang seemed to be implying something, but at this moment, he smiled. But you can't go to the meeting location I sent you previously. I'll send you another address. Prince didn't agree immediately, instead he was worried. Are you sure it's fine? You can ask around, there won't be any problems if you're serious about working with me. Kawang smiled faintly. Prince's tone was one of complete trust. Alright, send me the address, I'll head over with my brother. Alright. Kawang hung up, the smile on his face not fading. Scorpion heaved a sigh of relief. He had been worried that King would trick the other party. After all, the other party was someone he wanted to work with. If there was a problem on the way, he wouldn't be in a good position. After all, Scorpion knew very well that no one had said that the news of their meeting had been leaked. King's intention in making this call was very obvious. He wanted to naturally change the meeting location and disrupt the other party's rhythm. Only then would he know if there was a problem with them. Until now, the other party's reaction has been the same as a buyer, including his worry. Kawang's gaze dimmed. Take the call first, I won't believe it unless we meet face to face. Yes. Scorpion accepted the order and began to make preparations. On the other side, Prince broke out in a cold sweat again. He finally realized that Kawang had been bluffing him. If he had said that it was impossible, it wouldn't have suited his identity as a buyer. Buyers would be more concerned about whether the transaction was really safe, whether the supply was good enough, and how the price and benefits would be. Kawang's words hinted at the question. Perhaps only boss would be able to respond at the first moment. Prince finally understood why his boss was the only one who could complete this mission. Other than their boss, anyone who came would lose to Kawang in terms of psychological testing. In the end, they would all be wiped out. The change in location once again showed how suspicious Kawang was of them. Qin Imo knew that the other party wanted to catch them off guard, so he was especially calm and adjusted his state of mind. He didn't mess up his initial plan. As usual, they drove 3 cars out. Fatty's car was especially low-key, and after the first 2 cars drove out, he didn't immediately follow. Since they were in the empty area, Qin Imo would definitely consider spies. Boss, there's a car following us in the 9 o'clock direction. Hunter turned the steering wheel, turning to look at the reflection in the rearview mirror. He frowned. Qin Imo seemed to be resting. Normal, continue driving. Fatty, is there anyone following you? No, according to boss, we set off 3 minutes later. It's really peaceful, Fatty replied as he adjusted the rearview mirror back to its original position. He looked at the order of the cars on the viaduct. Qin Imo and the others were the first to pass, followed by the people Kawang had sent to watch them. Finally, it was Fatty. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. It seemed magical, but it was also mentally taxing. The person sitting in the car. Only Doctor knew why his boss's every move was so precise. From the moment the phone rang, he had been constantly writing about Kawang's psychological profile. Everything looked very peaceful. But in reality, boss's battle had started earlier than them. Doctor wasn't worried that his boss would be wrong in this aspect. He was worried about his boss's psychological state. Swoosh. The car door opened. Someone walked over. It was Scorpion. It was enough to show Kawang's sincerity by sending Scorpion over. Scorpion had assumed that the person sitting in the boss seat would be the familiar Prince. He hadn't expected it to be someone else. He arched a brow. Who is this? Prince glanced at his boss fearfully. Compared to his usual self, he seemed more restrained. My brother. Scorpion was enlightened. At the same time, he understood something. The real boss had arrived. Hello, I'm Scorpion. I've heard of your name. Scorpion stretched his hand out. Qin Imo was natural, not bothering to conceal his powerful aura. I've heard about you from Consultant. Scorpion was even more certain that there wouldn't be any unpleasantness in this collaboration. Why didn't I see Consultant today? There are some accounts that I need him to check. I see. Scorpion didn't ask further. He lifted the black cloth in his hand. I'm afraid I'll have to trouble everyone to cooperate. Qin Mo didn't agree immediately, his impatience obvious. He even frowned. What's the meaning of this? Sometimes the stronger your attitude, the softer the other party's attitude. Scorpion was like that. From his point of view, Qin Mo was rich and knew how to do business. In the future, the benefits from their collaboration would be huge. He couldn't offend him over such a small matter. The checks have been strict recently. According to the rules of the underworld, the first time you enter, there are too many things planted inside. If the location is known, everything will be gone. Please understand. Scorpion was ruthless when he was sinister, but when he wasn't, he was good with words. This type of person had to be careful. It wasn't without reason that Kawang had sent him. Chapter 1247. Scorpion heard the warning and immediately said, "Of course, once we earn money in the future, we will all be on the same side. Sorry for offending you this time." His words were polite. But Scorpion's wrist was firm. He lifted the black cloth and wrapped it 3 more times. Everyone was now in a state of darkness. They couldn't see anything. They couldn't even see the scanning rod when it passed by. But they could still feel it. Especially Qin Mo, he knew what was going on even when he was standing there. The person in charge of scanning shook his head at Scorpion, implying that there was no problem. Scorpion didn't speak, he raised his hand and pointed at his ear. The person in charge of scanning understood and pretended to sweep past Qin Mo's ear, but in reality he was checking for a small Bluetooth earpiece. The alarm didn't sound, which meant everything was normal. Scorpion laughed. Come, I'll get in first." The 5 of them were arranged in a commercial car, and Wolf was holding the deposit in his hand. Even though he was blindfolded, Qin Mo's aura was so strong that it was hard to ignore him. Scorpion was very satisfied and he gestured to the driver. What he didn't notice was, Qin Mo, who was leaning sideways, tapped lightly on his watch. The signal was activated. Fatty immediately placed his fingers on the keyboard and typed furiously in order to lock onto the position of the red dot. Finally, Fatty heaved a sigh of relief, moving towards the red dot. At the start he didn't think much of it. But after walking for a while he realized they were going in circles. Fatty was still worried about how to inform his boss. Actually, there wasn't a need to inform him. Because Qin Mo had already sensed Scorpion leading them in circles. Perhaps other Special Forces soldiers wouldn't be outstanding even if they were trained in this area. But for Qin Mo, observing his surroundings was his forte as a criminal psychologist. It wasn't just through images but also through sounds and senses. The same hawker had floated over 3 times. Besides, it wasn't just the hawker, the number of turns was the same as well. Qin Mo tilted his head. Blindfolded, he looked extremely harmless. But in reality both the military doctor and magician knew. Once they entered mission mode, their boss wouldn't stop his analysis. After all, time was tight to make a deal. Scorpion took another detour, but it was only a small one. Soon the car stopped. "Sorry to trouble you, sir. I need to change my mode of transportation." Scorpion was also very careful with his words and would not reveal any information. However, it was not difficult to tell where they were. The smell of water was strong. In addition, when they lifted their legs, there was a shaking sound. It was obvious that they were on a boat. A rattling sound rang out. Qin Mo could tell that it was the sound of a small speedboat's engine with just one listen. It seemed that they were very close to their destination. Qin Mo moved his fingers. When the speedboat started moving, the water splashed onto his hair. Separated by the black cloth, he looked calm as though he was a guest. This completely dispelled Scorpion's suspicions. However, there was a problem on Fatty's side. Suddenly, there was a network error notification. 1 second ago, Fatty was still using the network to track the signal, and the red dot was still at the address he had locked onto. The next second, the red dot had disappeared. Chapter 1248. The signal was cut off? Fatty wasn't the only one whose expression changed because of the sudden danger. Even the people sitting in the meeting room clenched their fists. This time the operation team was truly alone and without help. Even after giving the highest order and gathering everyone's strength, including the national defense, they still couldn't reconnect the signal. When Qin Mo realized that there was no signal, it was already 10 minutes later. After all, he was blindfolded and the others weren't talking, so he really couldn't notice the abnormality on his watch. It was just that the previous few times when the message was transmitted, the watch would vibrate slightly. This time it didn't. Qin Mo's eyes dimmed. Listening to the sound of the speedboat gliding past his ears, his emotions didn't change at all. The military doctor also knew that they had boarded the boat. Every special force soldier had the ability to sense the flow of water, let alone this group of people. But only the military doctor knew that any sound of water, especially in such an environment, could easily leave a psychological impression on Chin Mo. Whenever it rained, his boss's mood would be extremely bad. It wasn't without reason. The shadow that day on his boss still existed. The military doctor was even worried that it was related to the psychological suggestion. Time passed slowly. There was no progress in the meeting room. Fatty tried his best to think of a way but still couldn't lock onto the target. In the end, there was news that there was signal interference equipment inside. The radiation range was very wide, which was why it was easy for the plane to lose direction in this vicinity. In addition, when looking down, other than the complicated river below, there was only lush jungle. It was difficult to see the state of the situation inside, so there was no way to provide any support. The operation team had lost contact for half an hour. No one could predict what would happen in this half an hour. No news at this time might be the best news. The position of the sun moved down a little and the surrounding scenery also changed. It had to be said that this place was really beautiful, but that kind of beauty seemed to hide danger. The river narrowed. Not far away there were mercenaries with guns in their hands. Some sat on the boat, some stood on the shore as if they were patrolling. Unexpectedly, some of them were young, even the youngest was only 10 years old. Perhaps this was the real Golden Triangle. Because it was a lawless area, and because it wasn't peaceful, even children would carry guns. They were not poor. Even if stacks of money were to pass by them, they might not even blink. This place was rich in poppies. Everyone knew that there was no business in the world that could bring in money faster than poppies. What they lack is love. They didn't have parents, and even if they did, they were just slaves. He had been raised by Kawang's side since he was young and was different from the other children. Their eyes were even colder than ordinary people's. This was the scene that Prince saw when his blindfold was removed. He stood there in a daze, unable to believe his eyes. Scorpion stood to the side and laughed. "Welcome to our paradise. From here on out, no one will be able to disturb our cooperation." Chapter 1249. Scorpion lifted his chin, gesturing for him to look into the depths of the forest. Chin Mo tilted his head. The first thing he saw were two metal tower-like buildings. Every Special Forces soldier had received training in this area. Some reacted slowly while others reacted quickly. Chin Mo took a glance and understood what it was. It was a signal interference tower. Not bad. He put one hand into his trouser pocket and said slowly, "In this way our cooperation will be more secure." Scorpion laughed. "Boss Rong, you know your stuff." Prince's gaze was still on the children. Scorpion noticed it, turning his head over. "What? Second young master hasn't seen them before?" Prince admitted carelessly. "They are so young I haven't seen them before. Do they know how to shoot?" "Second young master Rong, don't underestimate them." The corners of Scorpion's lips curled up slowly. Sometimes they are the most useful when dealing with special forces trying to sneak in. Prince tried his best to look natural. "Are you serious?" "Of course." Scorpion sized him up. Second young master's expression when he looks at them is similar to the expressions of Special Forces soldiers. But the difference is that second young master doesn't look like a Special Forces soldier. Prince didn't move. Chin Mo spoke up at this moment. "That's why I let him come out to see the world. He is well protected at home. My brother's biggest flaw is that he isn't ruthless enough." With that, Chin Mo glanced at Prince. That glance made Scorpion give up on some thoughts. After all, the second son of some families was indeed like that. Moreover, he was a rich fool. He smiled. "Boss Rong, this way please." Chin Mo didn't say anything else. He stuffed a hand into his pocket, walking past the two boys who were gambling with their guns. His aura was as strong as ever. Prince was startled. He understood that his reaction just now might have been seen through. He immediately returned to his role, reaching out to touch the bridge of his nose. Just like a useless nouveau riche, he followed behind Chin Mo. Every scene made one's heart skip a beat. There was even a sense of repulsion towards this place from the bottom of their hearts. Scorpion called this place heaven, but in Prince's eyes, it was no different from hell. Although it is sunny and beautiful. But the things these children did made people feel a chill run down their spines. Magician, who was standing at the side, felt the same way. It wasn't because of the children, but because after seeing the building, they understood why their boss had asked Scorpion that question. Firstly, it was to lower Scorpion's guard, and secondly, it was to tell them that there was no signal here. All of their communication would have to be done through other means. From now on, they would not have any external help. Keeping himself alive and not exposing his identity was more important than anything else. Who would have thought that Kawang would hide in such a place? There was even a checkpoint on the river. Most importantly, if they continued to head east, they would reach the border of China. This was what the entire operation team was most concerned about, including Qin Mo. Because they would absolutely not tolerate any person or organization growing stronger day by day in a place so close to Wuxia, eyeing covetously like a tiger watching its prey. On the other side of the river, on a small road 50 kilometers away, a black Lamborghini roared past. It wasn't strange to see luxurious cars here, but most of them drove off-road vehicles, not this model. The AI system had already issued 3 consecutive warnings. When little Blackie predicted the next slope, he reminded the driver sincerely, "Master, slow down, really, I'm so handsome. If I dragged the bottom, it would look like a pair of leather shoes opening its mouth. It would be an awkward scene." Bojio arched a brow, not intending to be gentle. Little Blackie could only activate the self-rescue function when the bottom of the car came into contact with the huge pit. In the end, there was still a little smoke, but fortunately, it wasn't injured internally. As a broken car that relied on its looks to survive till now, it wasn't easy. Bojio ignored little Blackie's next words. Bojio opened the car door, walking into a mobile market. She wasn't sure if it was because of the environment. Many of them had broken arms and legs. Bojio could roughly guess why they were in such a state. Here, those who weren't willing to sell drugs would have their arms or legs broken. Now, the shadows of the flowers could no longer be seen. They had all turned into villages and crops. But the sales of drugs didn't decrease. It was probably because there was a need, there was a market. Those who took drugs out of curiosity or other reasons. They would never know that there were some people who lived at the edge of hell. They wouldn't compromise for something in their hearts. They knew better than anyone else how much destruction this thing could bring to a family. Hence, even if they had their arms and legs broken, they didn't want to participate. Who could understand their feelings? They weren't soldiers, they weren't even Chinese. They were ordinary citizens. All of them hoped that they had never harmed anyone. Sometimes, the heavens would give some people the best living environment. But those people didn't have a shred of conscience. Those who live at the bottom of society can emit light in their eyes. Because of this. That was why they wanted to destroy the hell that Kawang had created. Bojio raised her hand, lifting a black curtain. Sometimes what people lacked the most was medicine. Behind the black curtain, there would usually be a Mongolian doctor. This time he was the one who provided the medicine to Bojio. The moment Bojio entered, he moved back and forth. "Honestly, I really didn't want to prepare these for you. You should know that if you go against Kawang here, you will have to collect your corpse tomorrow. But after some thought, going against you hackers isn't going to end well either, after all." Bojio's expression turned serious. She looked at Bojio and said, "That's right, I didn't want to prepare these for you." With that, the Mongolian doctor suddenly paused, his eyes brightening as he looked at Bojio. Why are you here?" Bojio paused. "We don't know each other, right?" She definitely had an impression of such a unique breed. "Also, you put the cold medicine and diarrhea medicine together." Oh, the medicine is the same," he replied seriously. Chapter 1250. "That's not right. This isn't the time for that." The Mongolian doctor was still wearing his mask when he placed the medicine down. "I've seen you play before, you're so handsome. Why aren't you competing? Why are you here? Don't tell me you aren't going to compete. I've already bought the tickets for the Asian Cup, I'm telling you. If you aren't participating, I'll kill the tickets." "Bojio," the Mongolian doctor paused before adding shyly, "I'm your fan." Bojio was thinking about how to reply. The Mongolian doctor introduced himself once more. "The moment your name appears on the livestream platform, I'll appear and I'll be the one who receives the most gifts." Bojio replied calmly, "You've got the wrong person." "I've got the wrong person?" The Mongolian doctor removed his mask. "Don't underestimate the power of fans. Wait a minute, your skin has indeed turned darker and your nose isn't as straight as before. Is this the effect of breaking away from your fantasy? No, that's not right, isn't it a disguise? F***ck, why am I so dumb? It's definitely a disguise. You probably won't need the paint I prepared for you, it'll save on costs." Bojio smiled. "You call that saving?" "I'm saving it for your gifts," the Mongolian doctor replied confidently. Bojio thought, you might as well give me something more practical. In the end, she knocked on the table. Give me the things. The Mongolian doctor became more reliable when it came to serious matters. It's all here, I'll give you something else. Most importantly, God K. When you head out later, go for a stroll so Kwang won't be able to lock onto me. I'll use these 2 days to leave. I'll give you the medicine for free, there are too many poisonous snakes in the forest, it's better to be prepared. Bo Jio swept a glance at the medicine box, smiling. I won't need the sulfur, do you have anesthetics? Give me a dozen needles. The Mongolian doctor was cooperative, but he did not expect his idol to take away all his belongings. After a moment he turned towards her back view. Honestly, you should return to Supreme Alliance, it doesn't matter if you're a girl. Take me for example, after I found out you're a girl, my first reaction was to marry you. I just don't know if you have a boyfriend. I do. This was the first time Bo Jio had answered the Mongolian doctor's question. She seemed to have thought of someone, her lips curling into a smile. He's great, I'm planning to propose to him. The Mongolian doctor was stunned. Not only did he suddenly fall out of love, he was also fed a wave of dog food. You're a girl, why are you proposing? Bo Jio couldn't hear the Mongolian doctor's cries in his heart. After all the preparations were done, the car sped off the accelerator. No matter what, she wanted to find the Almighty and send him back to Jiang City. Just like what the Mongolian doctor said. There was still an Asian competition waiting for them in River Town. Not for anyone, but for himself. Only in the esports arena. That was the true joy of that person. There are still 20 kilometers to the destination. A river has been detected ahead. Do you want to change your form? Xiao Hei's voice came over. Bo Jio swung her tail. Change? Chapter 1251. When the number 1 appeared, Bo Jio's right hand moved. She shifted the gears and accelerated. She held onto the steering wheel and drove the car into the water. Everyone knew that once a car entered the river, the water would rush over from all directions, seeping through the gaps in the glass. Within a few seconds the car would be completely filled with water, and the entire car would sink as if it was submerged from top to bottom. The people inside wouldn't be able to escape. However, the moment the car entered the water, there was an obvious change to the car window. As the entire car was submerged, there was a loud rumble. The Lamborghini's bat-like door retracted and the tires changed directions. It was as though the car was sliding. Even though the appearance didn't change, the function was completely different. It wasn't just waterproof, it had its own propeller. The movement of the water was enough to propel the car forward. The headlights in front were 5 times brighter than usual. This way, even in the water they would be able to see the road in front clearly. Status change complete. Switch to water mode. Travel distance is 40 miles. Sufficient fuel. The detected problem is the water pressure is unstable. Manual propulsion is required. The smart navigation system fluctuated one curve after another. Bo Jio leaned back and looked up. She pressed the button on the sunroof and the hidden propeller rose. Accelerate. 2 words came out of her mouth. The smart navigation system responded to the corresponding force. The propeller spun faster and faster. The speed was almost twice as fast as before. The fish that were still swimming in the water dispersed. They didn't understand why such a huge fellow would enter their territory. Time trickled by. It was 4 p.m. in the afternoon. The sun shone down and pushed aside the thick fog. There was a vast expanse of flat land. The moment they reached the riverbank, Scorpion arranged for them to board an off-road vehicle. The only difference was that this time they weren't blindfolded. Because of this, the Crown Prince felt it even more deeply. This place was too beautiful. It was indescribably beautiful. There was a sea of flowers in full bloom. At the end of it was a straw hut. It was a place that could be called a fairyland. But because of the species of the sea of flowers, it became a bone-chilling sight. Poppy. The raw material for all drugs. When he walked in, Scorpion was still smiling. Don't smell too much, the pollen here is too strong. You'll get addicted if you smell too much. Prince's fingers were stiff because the smell was too strong. It was so strong that he felt uneasy from the bottom of his heart. Chinamo placed his hand on the edge of the car window. His hair was blown by the wind. He seemed to be enjoying it. Is that so? It should be very comfortable to sleep in such a place. Mr. Rong has the same idea as our king. Scorpion seemed to be surprised that the other party would say something like that, but on second thought, most vicious and merciless people wouldn't care if the things around them would harm others. After all, in their eyes, profit was the most important thing. Scorpion thought of this and smiled. Only then would he be worthy of being their partner. However, Scorpion did not know. From the moment they approached the Sea of Flowers, Prince, Magician and the rest subconsciously held their breaths to a certain extent. He quietly held his breath. Chapter 1252. Scorpion drove the off-road vehicle into a courtyard not far from the Sea of Flowers. He stopped the car. On the other side, a row of mercenaries stood in front of them. They had tattoos on their faces and they held guns in their hands. Their expressions were fierce. This was probably a characteristic of this place. The perennial sunlight made their skin tanned and they looked like outlaws. Only the person in the middle was different. That was Fanjia. But today she didn't reveal her face. Instead, she wore a cloak and stood there, hiding her appearance. The other person was wearing a suit and looked to be in his 50s. He held a walking stick in his hand and looked over as though he had been waiting for Qin Mo. When Prince saw that person, he clenched his fists instinctively. Magician and the others were the same. Only Qin Mo's gaze was calm. He didn't look at that person. Instead, he glanced over and paused on a man in a white coat. "This is our king," Scorpion introduced. "King, this is Boss Rong." The man with the walking stick reached his hand out. "Hello." Qin Mo lifted the corner of his lips. No one knew what he was thinking. His gaze deepened. "I've heard a lot about you. Come please." The man reached out and led Qin Mo into the house. The moment he entered the room, Qin Mo could smell the fragrance of poppies. "Sir, you really know how to enjoy yourself," Qin Mo said when he sat down. The man laughed. "Boss Rong knows his stuff. I'm used to this fragrance and sleep well at night." The man took out a cigar and passed it to Qin Mo. "Want one?" The moment he said that, Prince wanted to clench his fists. Prince wanted to clench his fists instinctively. After all, everyone knew that in a place like this, things like cigarettes couldn't be accepted because no one knew what was inside. But before he could react, Qin Mo had already taken a puff. Qin Mo was already smoking a cigar. He tossed one to him and said, "Test it." Prince didn't have time to react as he took the cigar. The man narrowed his eyes. "Mr. Rong, what do you mean? Even though I do business in this area, I don't touch such things." Qin Mo crossed his legs, his aura strong. "Sir, what do you mean by giving me this? Doubt my identity? Then can I also suspect Sir's identity? Are you really Kawang?" The man paused as if he hadn't expected him to be so direct. Moreover, this person didn't look like a soldier, nor was he sent by any department. However, the aura of a gangster was very strong. What was he going to say next? That person had no idea what to do. His gaze drifted in a certain direction. At this moment, even Prince could tell that there was something wrong with Kawang. Why did he keep looking at a family doctor? Just as the question popped up in his head, a voice entered his ears. "Boss Rong, you have a good eye." The family doctor walked out from inside. He was wearing a white coat and a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. He looked very gentle and even had an indescribable elegance. Chapter 1253. This was Kawang. Prince seemed to have understood something, glancing up at the family doctor. At this moment he was already seated in his seat, facing Qin Mo. The person in disguise stood up, standing at the side respectfully. In that instant, doctor and magician's hearts were in their throats. Even though their boss had changed drastically in terms of appearance. Even Fanjia hadn't been able to recognize him. But Kawang wasn't Fanjia. Other than being scheming, he was also a top criminal psychologist. When such a person was trying to identify others, they would not rely on their appearance to identify them. In this aspect, Qin Mo was the same. People like them were usually best at observing each other's details. For example, their actions, the way they spoke, even the minute movements when they drank water would be fatal. The reason why Kawang didn't show himself was because he had a plan from the start. He wanted to observe them in the dark. It was a pity that the people on his side weren't able to keep their composure. Kawang glanced up, sweeping a glance at the vicious face in front of him. Then he smiled. "Open the cigars, it'll be easier to inspect the goods." "Yes." Scorpion reached for a cigar, slicing it with a knife. Other than the tobacco, there was white powder inside. Qin Mo smiled playfully. "No wonder you don't have to worry about being investigated when doing business with Sir. Such packaging is natural." "That's normal." Kawang chuckled, raising the teapot and pouring a cup for Qin Mo. "I like Chinese calligraphy the most, but my skills are limited. In the past, I had a student who was good at calligraphy. It's a pity that he didn't follow me, but he made me very interested in Chinese culture, so..." Kawang smiled, lifting the teapot to pour a cup for Qin Mo. Kawang paused. Fan Jia passed him a ballpoint pen. Kawang reached out and broke it open. It was all fine white powder. Prince gritted his teeth as he watched from the side, but he couldn't show any hint of anger. He actually used stationery to transport goods. However, doctor and magician were thinking about something else. Could the student that Kawang was referring to be? In that instant, doctor's heart sank. What did Kawang mean? Had he seen through their boss's identity? Otherwise, why would he deliberately mention his student? His thoughts were disrupted. The military doctor knew that the current situation was very dangerous. He shouldn't follow her train of thought. However, those who studied psychology would usually be more sensitive than ordinary people. His thoughts were like this now. Then the boss would definitely be more complicated. Kawang hadn't confirmed his boss's identity and was just testing him. Boss's next reply was crucial. Not a bad idea. Qin Mo took the ballpoint pen and sized it up. Seeing this, I thought of a better idea. Instantly, Kawang's sinister gaze lessened. He arched a brow. Oh, what is it? The correction fluid is safer than this. Qin Mo tossed the pen aside, his aura thickening. Chapter 1254. Watch a movie? How could Kawang be in such a good mood? The military doctor looked at his boss worriedly. But Kawang didn't seem to be asking for anyone's opinion. With a raise of his hand, his men had already changed the setting in the living room. And where they were sitting, they were facing the screen. If they stood up and left now, their previous efforts would be in vain. They already had so much information. As long as they reached a place with a signal, they would be able to send out the exact location. The main force would arrive soon and completely destroy this hell-like place. But Kawang wasn't easy to deal with. Now, what was his purpose in doing this? Doctor couldn't figure it out. That was why he wasn't confident. Kawang sat on the chair and raised his wine glass. I wonder what kind of movies Boss Rong likes to watch. I personally like anti-reconnaissance movies, so I made the decision to choose this one. Boss Rong, don't be in a hurry to leave, such a good show isn't easy to come by. Is that so? Qin Mo arched a brow, a nonchalant expression on his face. Sir's introduction does pique my interest. Kawang laughed. You might like it since the main character is a good choice. The more he acted like this, the more suspicious Doctor was. His boss couldn't possibly not know that Kawang didn't come with good intentions. Was he testing him? The last test? Doctor tightened his fists, his thoughts unreadable. Even someone as insensitive as Prince could tell that the movie invitation wasn't simple. He looked at the atmosphere between the two of them. Especially the smile on Kawang's face. No matter how one looked at it, it was as sinister as a venomous snake. Even though he gave off a refined vibe, at the west side by the shore, a rustling sound could be heard. The patrolling mercenary frowned. He carried his rifle and walked towards the bushes. The moment he stepped in, before he could raise his rifle, a figure flew down from the tree, a needle plunging into his neck. It was a fatal blow. The mercenary opened his mouth, looking at the youngster on the ground. His breathing stopped abruptly. Bojio pulled him to the shore. Under the layers of banana leaves, a car door was revealed. Her movements were very fast. She took off the person's clothes and put them back on in less than a minute. The network has been completely blocked. I can't contact the outside world, and the outside world can't contact us either. I won't be able to lock onto Master's location, so when Master moves, you must be careful. Little Black will wait for you to come back. Bojio didn't waste her breath. She reached out and patted Little Blackie's car door. Then she moved the banana leaves back. When she turned around again, she had already changed her appearance. She was wearing a mercenary uniform and her face was covered with a mask. In order to make the effect more realistic, she even got a one-time tattoo at the corner of her eye. Other than the gun in her hand and the 4 syringes in her pocket, she had no other weapons. But that was all they could do because they wanted to sneak in and destroy the signal tower. Therefore they had to travel light and not bring anything. Chapter 1255. Bojio knew she was at the periphery, she had to head in. Bojio lifted her head, glancing towards the signal jamming tower 3 kilometers away. However, in the next second, his figure paused for a moment. There were poppies everywhere, swaying along with the wind. It was beautiful, but it gave off a strong sense of danger. After all, it was hard to concentrate if one smelled too much of the pollen. Since the network signal couldn't be used, the laptop was useless. Of course, it wasn't certain. There were still loopholes in the network. Bojio reached for the communication cable and the black earpiece she had taken from the mercenary. Her eyes dimmed. But in a place with a signal jamming tower, hacking into the network would be easily discovered. This was what she had done. Of course she wouldn't fall into such a trap. Based on the time, the Almighty should have met up with Kawang. If they found out that someone had infiltrated the group, the Almighty's disguise would be exposed. Bojio tilted her head. Besides, there were many ways to stop the signal jamming tower. Hacking wasn't the only way. She had to shut down the signal jamming tower without exposing the Almighty's identity. That way the investigation team would have enough time to lock onto the exact location. Bojio believed the Almighty had other plans in mind. That was why she was sure there would be an investigation team not far from here. They should have stopped at the place where they couldn't find the Almighty. Even though she was worried, she couldn't search recklessly because the moment she did, the entire mission would be in vain. Kawang would take the chance to escape just like the previous time. Hence, she couldn't give Kawang another chance. She had to confirm the location before closing in quietly. That way Kawang would be caught off guard. You must be thinking the same thing. Brother Mo. Bojio glanced up, plugging her earpiece. Her slender figure was about to move when a voice came from behind her. A voice came from behind. Hey you, who are you in charge of? Why are you here? Bojio turned with her gun, speaking in the local language. I'm here to relieve myself, my head hurts from looking at those farmers. Don't be too relaxed, King has instructed us not to make any mistakes today. That person glanced at Bojio but didn't say much. He grabbed his gun and went somewhere else. After all, he had never imagined that someone would disguise as one of them and infiltrate their ranks. In addition, Kawang had locked up all the spies and suspected spies yesterday. That meant that there was nothing wrong with the rest. Therefore, that person's guard wasn't very high. What's more, they were inspecting the surface of the water within a 50-kilometer radius. Since the alarm didn't go off, it was even less likely that someone would sneak in. After all, there wasn't even a ship in sight. However, who knew? Bojio didn't walk on the surface but under the water. Bojio's gaze deepened as she reached out to pull down the towel. She lifted her legs and walked behind him. Bojio wouldn't make a move. Because of her voice in my ear. Number 7, what happened to number 7? Speak. I just went to the toilet. Next time when you go to the toilet, keep the communication line open. What's the situation on your side? Everything is normal. Bojio pushed the syringe back into her pocket. Every mercenary here had a Bluetooth earpiece. If one of the Bluetooth earpieces didn't receive a reply, the main communication room would be alerted. Hence, unless it was absolutely necessary, she wouldn't make a move to get rid of him. This way, it would increase the difficulty of her infiltration. It was impossible for there to be no one guarding the signal shielding tower's engine room. It seemed like she could only make use of the time difference. She had to find out how often they would question her. Once she reached the engine room, she would definitely hurt someone. Only by controlling the engine room would she be able to prevent the signal shielding tower from detection even if it was shut down. Hence, the timing of her attack was crucial. Bojio tilted her head, a pair of dark eyes glistening. Her guess was right. Perhaps it was because he knew a person too well that he could even guess the other party's thoughts. Chinamo had chosen this method to get close to Kawang because he wanted to drag him out. While they were discussing business, the troops would be able to accurately lock onto Kawang's location and the largest drug production base. In order to rescue all the hostages safely, they had to get close to him when he least expected it. If Kawang noticed the commotion, those ordinary tourists would lose their lives here. And that school at the border. This was the reason why Chinamo didn't stand up even though he knew the movie was going to be an unfavorable test for him. He sat on the chair, looked at the screen and held the teacup with his fingers. Because the knife wound on his face was still there, he looked a little fierce. His temperament as a big boss hadn't changed at all. Kawang held the remote control, pushing his spectacles before pressing the play button. It was not a movie. Instead, it was a video recorded by the school's surveillance system. Chinamo leaned back. I don't seem to have the same taste as you. I'm not interested in artistic films with school themes. With that, he tilted his head. How's the inspection? Prince knew that it was time for him to regain his composure. It's alright, it's all good stuff. Brother, are we really going to stay here to watch a movie? It's so boring. If you're bored, go find something to do. Don't bother me and sir, Chinamo said calmly. Kawang smiled. I'll bring second young Master Rong out to play. I want you to take a look at this movie. Boss Rong, don't misunderstand, this isn't an artistic film. You'll understand when you continue watching. It's something interesting that happened when I was playing outside. The moment he finished his sentence, a fat girl was suddenly pushed against the wall in the video. Even though there was no sound, everyone's expression could be seen in the video. They crossed their arms as though they were interrogating. But it wasn't a friendly way of questioning. He raised his hand and poked the fat girl's shoulder. In that instant, the atmosphere in the room seemed to have changed. Was this school violence? Prince tried his best not to let anyone see his expression. But what exactly was going on with this video? Those people were obviously wearing their country's middle school uniform. Was this a local school? Which one? It wasn't that Prince hadn't gone to school before. When he was in school, he would occasionally see girls huddled together and neglected one of them. But it wasn't like this. This was already before Prince could think of anything. Chapter 1256. The fat girl in the video dashed out. He thought that was the end of the matter. Unexpectedly, the video was pulled to the classroom. On the screen, the teacher let a transfer student in. That transfer student was actually Little Black. Prince tried his best to control his expression, but in that instant, his hands still tightened around the handle of the chair. What was going on? Did Little Black go on a mission and his disguise was exposed? Prince tightened his grip. He wanted to turn his head to look at his boss. At this moment, Kwang's attention was focused on Boss Rong's face. He didn't notice anyone else. Chin Mo crossed his legs, still in the same position, supporting his chin. He didn't seem interested in the video, only glancing at it occasionally. Even Bo Jio's appearance didn't pique his interest. But in that instant, no one could see the throbbing in his chest. Kwang raised his hand, raising his wine glass. Seems like Boss Rong is bored. It's all right. Chin Mo touched it casually. I'm more concerned about the business. Kwang smiled. Me too, but since the show has started, let's watch it till the end. Chin Mo didn't object, seemingly indifferent. But when he looked at the video again, he felt as if his heart was being squeezed. Why was she there and not at the military base? Chin Mo swirled his wine glass, as though that was the only way to suppress his uneasiness. Kwang spoke again, his tone filled with regret. All the students in this school were supposed to be my hostages, but this fellow ruined it. Boss Rong probably didn't know that this high school student isn't simple at all. It's a pity that her opponent is me. Chin Mo raised his hand, drinking a mouthful of wine, the ruthlessness of a gangster. That's interesting. Indeed. Kwang retracted his gaze, glancing in Fanjia's direction. The question in his eyes was obvious. Fanjia nodded. Kwang lowered his head with a smile, his eyes filled with danger. Up until now there hadn't been any flaws. He had suspected that Chin Mo was the one in charge of the business. President Rong did look like someone from the underworld. Even his small habits didn't seem like something Chin Mo would do. In his memory, that young man was always arrogant, and when he looked at him, there was even a trace of boredom in his eyes. It was the most unpleasant experience he had ever had as a professor. All the students in the university looked at him with eyes full of worship. However, the successor that he had chosen was looking at him with that kind of gaze. In fact, it was completely incompatible with his philosophy. They were both people who understood human nature the most, just like him. Not only did they refuse to cooperate with him, but they even put him in jail. Ordinary people were meant to be used and dominated. It was time for Chin Mo to understand this logic. Yes, Kwang didn't really want Chin Mo to die. Rather than letting him die, he would rather have him become his subordinate. That was what he wanted to see the most. As long as he could successfully activate the hypnosis, Chin Mo would become his best weapon against the military. So he had to figure it out. After all, Boss Rong was here to do business. Chapter 1257. At this moment, outside the wooden hut, in the middle of the sea of flowers, it wasn't easy to grow the poppies well. The mercenaries would always patrol the area so that the farmers wouldn't dare to have any ulterior motives. Similarly, this area became the most heavily guarded area. Bo Jio carried her gun and walked past one of the farmers. Her actions were fierce. No one suspected her even when she was near the engine room. But in order to enter the engine room, she had to be able to match the slogan. Bo Jio walked back and forth. She looked like she was patrolling the perimeter, but in reality, she was listening to the movements there. 3 batches of people had entered the engine room. It was just that these 3 groups of people all had different slogans. Even with her strong memory, it was hard for her to enter such a defense mechanism. Just as Bojio narrowed her eyes, the fourth batch walked over. Bojio arched a brow. She held a cigarette in her right hand and placed her left hand on the shoulder of one of them. "Brother, do you have a lighter?" "Of course." The person swept her a glance. "But why do you look so unfamiliar? When did you come? Are you in charge of the engine room?" Bojio watched his gaze and noticed the suspicion in it. She smiled faintly. "I haven't been here for long. That's why I haven't seen you before." The person lit his lighter and moved it in front of her. Bojio lit the cigarette but didn't continue to follow him. Instead, she waved her hand. "Thanks. It's okay." The person's suspicions were dispelled when he saw that she wasn't moving forward. He walked towards the engine room. Bojio held the cigarette in her mouth. Her patrolling posture was natural, as though she had indeed been borrowing a lighter. However, only she knew that if she had continued, her identity would have been exposed. Breaking through the defense of the engine room was harder than she had imagined. It seemed like this time she would have to be more patient and observe. Bojio glanced up and puffed out a string of smoke. She watched the setting sun and listened to the slogan of the seventh batch. A smile appeared on her lips. As expected, after the third slogan, another round. She walked towards the engine room. As the eighth batch, she was stopped by the guards. They glanced at Bojio before replying. "Slogan?" Bojio searched through her memories and recited the slogan unhurriedly. The guards looked at each other and stood to the side. Bojio knew her slogan was right. She held the gun in one hand and walked in. The computer room was huge. Once she entered, she could see the security cameras in the corridor. There were a total of 6 of them, and every single one of them was an obstacle to her movements. Therefore, she had to change her identity so that she could come into contact with the mainframe without using force. Yes, there was a change in her plan. After she saw so many cameras made, she wasn't going to destroy the tower again, because there was another way that was safer. Using the computers here to share IP addresses would not be blocked by the signal tower. The shielding equipment was like a protective shield that perfectly covered the area, making it impossible for anyone to find it quickly. But if it was their own network and equipment, it definitely wasn't blocked. Otherwise, how could they communicate normally? Bojio noticed that none of them had a phone. Even the mercenaries didn't have any. Not to mention the gardeners. The only thing that could silently share the address were the 5 computers in the computer room. Bojio glanced sideways at the technician who was making adjustments behind the glass. When one of them left, Bojio waited for him to leave. She followed after him. This scene wasn't wrong even under the surveillance cameras. After all, Bojio looked like she was patrolling. Bojio didn't take action immediately. Instead, she waited until the person entered the toilet. When he wasn't paying attention, she raised her hand and knocked him out. Then she dragged him into one of the compartments. Bojio scrutinized the person's state. She glanced over and reached out to tear his collar. His hair fell down and his back arched. She tugged at his shirt handsomely. With his messy hair, she put on his shirt. When she came out again, she had changed her clothes. She wasn't the same as before. She wore a pair of black-rimmed spectacles and dipped her hair in water, making it look a little oily. She wore a jacket, and when she walked, her posture changed. Her back was hunched, the perfect image of a technical otaku, even a little dispirited. This meant that from the back, no one would know that she had changed into a different person. It was a perfect disguise. However, just as Bojio was about to leave, she noticed a little boy looking at her while washing his hands. The boy was about 11 or 12 years old. His skin was tan due to the intense daily life. Due to the poor environment, he looked very skinny. Especially his arms, he gave off a weak and small vibe. He didn't look dangerous standing there because there was nothing in his eyes. It was pure black. The moment Bojio walked past him, the boy reached into his pocket in the mirror. It was an action of pulling out a gun. He had already pulled out his gun, the muzzle pointed at her back. Swoosh. The boy didn't seem to expect the other party to be on guard against him. Before he could open fire, his throat was pierced by the military knife that appeared. So much so that he couldn't even say a word. He just widened his eyes and leaned back. Bojio reached out and caught him. She locked the boy, whose body was gradually turning cold, together with the technician from before. At the start, Bojio didn't think about guarding against a child. Even if he were to calculate the time, it was very likely that he would have heard something. But as she approached the boy, a familiar image seemed to spill out of her mind. It was mentioned in the Bible. When your soul left your body, you would remember many things in your life. Those things would be like a movie replayed in your mind. but there were some memories that you would lose. For example, how you left your body. Or things that you purposely wanted to blur out. That was why there was a saying, forget about your life so that you can rest in peace. But in that instant there was a replay. Why did she die? It was because of that moment of softness. It was after she had settled a case, walking on the bustling streets of Tokyo. There was a cheerful Christmas atmosphere everywhere. An 11-year-old girl's balloon floated onto a tree. She tugged at her sleeve, asking if she could help her take the balloon down. At that time, Bojio didn't realize that the girl had taken out a gun when she turned around. It was very similar to the scene now. Kwang loved to nurture demons. Bojio wouldn't make the same mistake twice. Because of what she had learned from the Almighty, it was enough for her to observe the danger the child posed. Young children were the scariest when they hurt others. A child that could survive in such a place wasn't simple. Besides, Kwang was here. Bojio raised her hand, wiping the blood off her face. She knew that if it had been someone else like Prince, he wouldn't have been so ruthless. But she was different, her heart had long turned black. But sometimes she would come back empty-handed. Bojio adjusted her jacket. When she walked out of the washroom, her back was hunched, befitting her current identity. There weren't any surveillance cameras in the washroom. Hence, the surveillance room didn't notice anything amiss. Even when Fan Jia had taken a glance at the surveillance cameras, she hadn't been able to see through her disguise. But she wasn't Kwang, nor was she Chin Mo. When the images from different locations appeared, she could only tell that something was wrong like this kind of disguise. Unless she had specially looked for it, it would be hard for anyone to notice anything amiss with just a glance. Besides, Bojio hadn't chosen anyone randomly. After careful observation, she had chosen someone with a figure that was the closest to her. Every technician was focused on their computer screen. Hence, when Bojio sat down, the other four hadn't snapped back to their senses. But Bojio couldn't be too obvious. Because there were surveillance cameras here as well. At this moment, inside the wooden hut, the video showed a person struggling in the water. It seemed to be a prank in the school. Prince was still guessing. But the military doctor had already sensed something was amiss. This wasn't a scene from the surveillance cameras. Why had Kwang planted such a scene in the surveillance cameras? Wait a minute. Water. Every time their boss's mood fluctuated, it was related to water. Even they weren't sure what had happened that day. But the person who had planted the hypnosis knew. The military doctor, who was inspecting the other items, wanted to speak but Chin Mo interrupted him. How's the purity? It's very pure, the military doctor replied. Chin Mo chuckled as though nothing had happened. He used his wine glass to touch Kwang's. Let's have a pleasant cooperation. Let's have a pleasant cooperation. Kwang's gaze dimmed. He seemed to be sizing up the person in front of him. At this moment the video changed again. It was the scene where the youngster had gone to the infirmary to look for Kwang, who had disguised himself as the school doctor. The scene appeared clearly in front of everyone. In the video, Kwang was very knowledgeable. He had asked the youngster to test the thermometer politely. He seemed to have said something. The youngster didn't seem to be on guard. Then Kwang glanced at the thermometer that the youngster had tested. He stood up and walked towards the water heater. No one knew what medicine he had added. However, when he stood up, even the military advisor had a premonition that once the young man drank this thing, he would definitely be in danger. At that moment, Kwang had already sensed something was wrong with the youngster. Chapter 1258. The military doctor turned towards Chin Mo instinctively when he saw the scene in the video. Recruit number 10 held a special meaning to his boss. The military doctor remembered clearly how many rules his boss had broken in the military just to get closer to the recruit. He had never imagined that he would see such a smile on his boss's face. It was pure and without any impurities. It was because he had thought of that person. But now the recruit wasn't able to escape. In the video, Kwang had already turned over, passing the medicine to the youngster. The youngster took it. At this moment the video stopped. Prince's eyes were red but he couldn't lift his head to show his abnormality. Kwang was in a good mood, pouring himself another glass of wine. Boss Rong, can you guess how I dealt with him in the end? Chin Mo sat there, feeling a chill in his heart. After a certain degree of pain he would no longer feel it. It was as though a part of his soul had been pulled out. He lifted the corner of his lips. Sir, I really can't guess your methods. After all, in my place you would just break your limbs. That would be too bloody for a weak doctor like me. I prefer a cleaner method. Kwang swirled his wine glass. Wasn't there a pond in the video? It's in the gymnasium near the school. I tied 2 bricks to his legs and threw him into the water. When he was in the water, he woke up but he couldn't come up after a long time. He sank to the bottom of the water. Qin Mo listened to the voice beside his ear. The results told him not to believe Kwang's words. But his brain was indeed numb, his body sinking. He didn't dare to think too much because the moment he did, the scene that Kwang had described would appear in his mind. He had dreamed of it countless times but he didn't want to believe it. The blurry figure was sinking slowly in the water. No matter how he stretched out his hands, he couldn't pull her up. She was too far away, he didn't even have the chance to see her for the last time. "Boss, the inspection is done." When the military doctor walked over, he accidentally knocked over the teacup on the table. Gotcha. He was shocked as if he had done something wrong. "Boss, I deserve to die." Qin Mo's hand turned cold. His fingertips moved, his gaze changing slightly. "You broke Mr. Ka's teacup, not mine." Hearing this, the military doctor turned around and was about to apologize. Kwang raised his hand, a gentle smile on his face. "It's just a cup. Boss Rome will come often in the future, this is just a small matter." When Scorpion heard his boss say this, he knew that there was no problem with this deal. The other party's identity had passed his boss inspection. It was indeed so. Kwang glanced at Boss Rong who was still focused on the transaction. Basically, he denied some of his guesses. The hypnosis had been activated. But this person didn't react. Unless the person in the video wasn't important to him or he wasn't Qin Mo. Kwang was leaning towards the second option. After all, that youngster was their trump card against Qin Mo. It was impossible for him not to be important. Although it was a little regretful that he didn't get to see what he wanted to see. However, the other aspects were not bad. For example, there was nothing wrong with this group of people. They could work together now. Kwang glanced up at Fan Jia. Understanding, Fan Jia walked to the front to check the money. "Wang, they only brought half of the deposit." "Oh," Kwang replied, turning towards the person beside him. "Boss Rong, what do you mean?" "Sir, you are so guarded against others. I have to hold back." Qin Mo glanced up. "You asked us to come to the designated location but you didn't even let us know the address. Sir, you should be aware that the scariest thing in the underworld is a scam. I'm afraid I might encounter such an incident at night. Moreover, Boss Rong's business has always been like this. The deposit will only be paid after the deal is settled." What he said made sense. Kwang knew that the longer one stayed in the underworld, the more cautious he was. After all, there would be times when he failed miserably. Qin Mo stood up, grabbing his jacket. "Since there are no problems with the goods, we can inform the consultant and get him to transfer the other portion of the deposit into your account." Prince spoke up at the right time. "Brother, don't worry. I can't get through. I tried but there isn't any signal here." "I'm sorry." Kwang smiled. "Second young master must not be used to it. I have no choice, this place is only this big and it's just a business to maintain my livelihood. However, China keeps chasing after me. In order to defend myself, I have to resort to such means." With that, Kwang paused. "Fan Jia, pass your phone to Boss Rong." "Yes." Fan Jia reached out, passing her phone over. Since he wasn't the person, there wasn't much to see. Qin Mo didn't move. Prince didn't know what was wrong with his boss but he knew he had to pick up the phone. They had put in so much effort just for this. He reached out to take the phone, placing it in Qin Mo's palm. "Brother, you should contact the family. The consultant won't listen to me." Qin Mo's gaze was deep. Prince couldn't read his emotions but there was an indescribable danger in his eyes. "Image, contact the family," Qin Mo replied, dialing a string of numbers. Ring ring ring. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be any phones in such an important meeting. But the phone that rang was the one everyone hoped would light up. According to the original plan, Qin Mo would use this number to contact the higher-ups. An unknown number was displayed on the screen. General Qin was in his military uniform. He lifted his finger and pressed the answer button. "Hello, is this the consultant?" He turned on the hands-free button. Everyone in the conference room was quiet. They were giving General Qin time to communicate with them. At the same time, someone hurriedly made a hand gesture, indicating for them to locate the source of the call. General Qin replied in a low voice, "It's me." His voice seemed to wake Qin Mo up. "There's no problem with the goods, you can transfer the money." "What's the account number?" Everyone knew that these weren't the most important questions. The most important thing was to confirm the exact location of the operation team through the duration of the call. After all, it usually took a long time to read out the account number. This was Qin Mo's plan from the start. It was to prevent the other party from cutting off all their communication devices, preventing them from tracking their location. Now they finally saw a glimmer of hope. But no one expected that the glimmer of hope would disappear as quickly as it came. Just as Qin Mo read out the two numbers, the signal came from the other side. It was the sound of the phone being hung up. Beep beep beep. Damn it. The technical soldier outside the meeting room threw his earpiece away, his hands clenched into fists. Just a little more, and we would have been able to locate the exact location of the call. The leader in the meeting room glanced over. Everyone was concerned about the outcome. How is it? The technical soldier shook his head. The person at the top said, "Continue to lock on." The technical soldier wanted to continue locking onto the target, but he knew very well that it was impossible to lock onto the target without the signal. The other party didn't just hang up, he removed the communication card. Indeed. Kawang reached for the phone when Qin Mo said the second number, smiling. Let Fan Jia send the account number. With that he tossed the phone behind him. Fan Jia caught the phone and removed the communication card in it. Hunter and Magician clenched their fists when they saw this. They weren't sure if the time was enough for the troops to locate their exact location. However, this wasn't the only problem Dr. Qin was worried about. The most important thing was Boss. Perhaps Boss didn't realize it himself, but the light in his eyes had started to change. Boss. What was he thinking? Qin Mo wasn't thinking about anything. Images flashed through his mind. Every scene was related to the youngster. In the end, there was the surging water and the wrist he couldn't grab in time. At this moment, the technical soldier outside the meeting room was still trying his best. Just as he was about to tell General Qin that he couldn't locate young master's location, suddenly, a red dot lit up on his local network. It was here. This was the address that young master had just called from. Wait a minute. This was signal transmission? Someone had hacked into the other party's network? How was that possible? Even though he couldn't believe it, it was indeed the address. The technical soldier didn't hesitate. With the red dot's guidance, it was too easy to locate them. In less than a minute, the technical soldier shouted, "General, it's done. The coordinates are 35 degrees north latitude, 47 degrees south latitude." The technical soldier didn't know that he wasn't the only one with a red dot. Everyone who was tracking Qin Mo and young Master Tang had the same result. Fatty and young Master Tang had the same result. In just a short moment, the sea, land and air forces rushed towards the same direction at the fastest speed. In the computer room on the island, Bojio was still sitting in her seat, a pair of spectacles on her face. On the computer screen, she seemed to be adjusting the local surveillance system. But in reality, under the hidden dialog box, there was a continuous stream of code. She didn't hack into the network. Instead, she opened up the computer room's IP to maximize the sharing. The computer room's IP was shared, but it could only be shared locally. Now she had opened up the network and cracked the password. Then he would create a fake protective cover to stabilize the balance of the regional network. This way he would be able to transmit the address without anyone noticing. The signal jamming tower was still there. Phones from the outside world couldn't be used here. But there was one thing. They thought it was the safest. In reality, they didn't know that their location had been leaked. Kawang didn't come to the computer room today because he had a business meeting. But very quickly he sent Fan Jia over. At this moment, Bojio was already repairing the system and erasing the traces, restoring the IP to its original state. Then she stood up, pushed the glasses on her face and walked towards the bathroom. When she came out again, she was dressed as a mercenary, holding a rifle in one hand. Bojio hadn't expected to meet Fan Jia face to face. Fortunately, her face was black and she had grown a layer of beard. Bojio didn't dodge. Instead, she walked towards Fan Jia as though she was patrolling. Both of them brushed past each other. Suddenly, Fan Jia glanced in Bojio's direction, narrowing her eyes. Wait a minute. Bojio paused, turning back slowly. She was wondering if her injection was faster or the big guy beside Fan Jia's rifle. Time seemed to have slowed down, stretched out. Fan Jia glanced at Bojio's face, asking, "Did you see anyone suspicious?" No. Bojio released the injection in her pocket. This way she looked more natural, the tattoo at the corner of her eyes more obvious. Fan Jia had more important things to do. She wasn't going to waste her time on a mercenary. She turned, reaching out to push the glass door open. Bojio stood outside, her voice faintly audible. "Is there anything amiss?" "No." "Where's the person sitting on the second computer?" "She's here, she probably went to the washroom." Fan Jia frowned, turning on the computer on the second computer instinctively. Her first reaction was to check if there were any signs of an attack on the regional network, to check if there were any problems with the firewall. She also checked the computer for any abnormalities. After confirming there were no problems, she stood up, her expression unhappy. In the future, no one is allowed to go out alone, not even to the washroom, understand? Yes. After Fan Jia heard the answer she wanted, she tested the shielding equipment. It was working normally. At this moment, Fan Jia didn't know. What exactly had she missed out? If Kawang had been here, he might have been able to sort out the problem quickly. No matter how smart Fan Jia was, she wouldn't have guessed that the computer room seemed normal, but in reality, it had been attacked. And the person who had attacked it. Bojio walked out of the computer room. She reached out, pulling the mask up to her nose. It was probably because the mercenary's gait exuded a sense of wildness. He held the gun with one hand, his gaze filled with murderous intent. Hence, she didn't suspect his identity. Bojio walked forward, one hand in her pocket, passing through the flower railings. Her next target was the wooden hut by the river. Bojio tilted her handsome face. Behind the veil, she couldn't help but smile. Brother Imo, I'll see you soon. Chapter 1259. But at that moment, Bojio wasn't aware of what Qin Imo was going through. The fastest reinforcements would need at least 10 minutes to get here. 10 minutes. Qin Imo suppressed the images countless times, but the emptiness in his chest was unbearable. No one noticed that his eyes had darkened. Even Kawang's attention was on Fan Jia. How is it? Master, don't worry, the engine room is functioning normally. That's good. Kawang smiled, continuing to lead them towards the lake. The poppies there were in full bloom and the latest product was produced. It was a type of candy that was even more addictive than ecstasy. Or rather, it was disguised as a candy. Prince's eyelids twitched when he saw this. Kawang seemed to enjoy his shock, tearing one of the candies apart. This is the perfect disguise, it will be easier to enter the country. The stationery is still a risk, but these fake candies are different. Besides, in the Chinese market, these are the most popular candies in the nightclubs. However, the checks are too strict and it isn't easy for some people to sell them. It would be best if the Rong family has the channels. At this moment, Prince felt extremely fortunate that they had contacted Kawang before the drug dealers. He was really vicious. In his mind, there wasn't anything he should or shouldn't do. What would happen if these things entered the supermarket by mistake? Children would definitely eat them. Prince couldn't imagine such a scene. Was Kawang trying to use drugs to control everyone's lives? What? Second young master doesn't seem to like such packaging. Kawang was observant, his eyes dark as he watched Prince's expression. In that instant, almost everyone sensed a message. There was a flaw on their side. Kawang was suspicious. At the same time, Fan Jia, who had hung up, glanced at the number 2 camera. After waiting for a full 3 minutes, she suddenly asked, "When did he go to the toilet?" "It's been about 15 minutes. The technician beside her frowned. "What happened? Why did he take so long?" Fan Jia wasn't stupid, her instincts told her that something must have happened. He turned around and strode in the direction of the bathroom. The mercenaries were the first to enter. When they reached the last cubicle, they turned their heads and said, "There's someone inside." Fan Jia narrowed her eyes. "Kick it open." Yes. The mercenaries were still very destructive. With one kick, the wooden door was kicked open with a bang. There were indeed people inside. However, it was completely different from what they had imagined. A technician who had been knocked unconscious and a boy who had been stabbed in the head with a syringe. It was easy to imagine what this signified. Fan Jia didn't hesitate, her first reaction was to call Kawang. Kawang's gaze was still on Prince's face, but it was hard to tell. Fan Jia's voice was anxious. "Master, the engine room has been tampered with. There's something wrong with the business owner's identity." Kawang clenched his fists when he heard this. At that moment no one could tell. He turned, his smile even gentler. Dressed in a white coat, he exuded a murderous aura. "I already know it's not a big problem. I'll come over after the arrangements are made. I still have to discuss the new product with Boss Rome." Fan Jia had been by Kawang's side for a long time. The moment she heard his words, she understood what he meant. The other party was still around. Her master knew about it, but he pretended to be oblivious. He wanted to lead them to a dead end and destroy them all. These people weren't afraid of death. They came in waves. They were smarter than before. So what? All of them would die here. Fanjia hated the fact that she hadn't caught the youngster in the video. If she had, she would have fed her drugs and turned her into a living hell. It was better than letting her disappear. On the other side, Kwang had already hung up. He glanced up at the group. Everyone must be hungry after watching for so long. Why don't we eat while looking at the new product, Scorpion? Yes. Scorpion didn't know what had happened. Kwang smiled. Bring out the feast we usually prepare for our VIPs. Let Boss Rong and the rest have a good taste. Scorpion paused, instantly understanding the meaning behind those words. His eyes turned dangerous as he glanced at Prince and the others, lowering his head and replying, yes. When he turned around again, his expression had changed. He made a throat-slitting gesture at the mercenaries who were looking at him. Kwang continued to lead them forward. Just as Prince and the rest were about to take a step forward. Suddenly, their boss lowered the hand holding the cigarette, tapping the side of his thigh lightly. Once, twice, thrice. It was fast and rhythmic. It was a common code used during World War II. There were only 5 words in the translation. Kwang is going to attack. Be it hunter or wolf, both of them instinctively looked for their weapons in that instant. Kwang continued, I admire Boss Rong's courage, but it's a pity. With that he turned, raising his hand to shoot. Unexpectedly, the person who was originally standing next to him was 1 step faster than him. His figure flashed and his leg kicked the gun in his hand away. Kwang's eyes darkened. The mercenaries opened fire in unison. However, these people seemed to be prepared in advance. They slid into the flower field and used the harvester to block their bodies. Prince leaned against the wheel, not having the chance to catch his breath. Boss's voice rang out. Jacket. Prince snapped back to his senses, removing his jacket and tossing it over. Qin Mo and Wolf stood at the same position, pulling the pendants down. The 2 of them started working. In less than 20 seconds, 2 small guns were produced. Prince was wearing bullets on his wrist. There weren't many, only 10 bullets. They were loaded into the 2 guns. When they had entered, they had gone through a strict inspection. Scorpion was so thorough that he even checked their ears. He hadn't expected them to have guns. Charge, they don't have any weapons. Scorpion lifted the gun in his hand. But the moment he finished speaking, there was a loud bang. The mercenary closest to the harvester fell to the ground, his head blown off. They have a sniper. The mercenaries exchanged glances, wanting to scatter. But a second gunshot rang in the air. Another bullet pierced through his chest. Scorpion couldn't figure out where they had gotten their weapons from. Until he saw the black leather jacket. He kicked the wooden bucket beside him. It was filled with poppies. How dare they trick him so brazenly? That second young master didn't like this kind of upstart clothing that was full of metal accessories. Instead, he liked to assemble those accessories together to form a gun. Scorpion hadn't thought of this. Firstly, Prince's image was too deep. Secondly, it was hard to guess Almighty Qin's tricks. That was why Scorpion had made a mistake in his work. He was able to react better. Everything that the other party had done was planned. Even disguising as someone was one of them. Very quickly, Scorpion realized that they weren't the same as the people they had met previously. Ah! Scorpion screamed, aiming his gun at the same spot. Who exactly are you? Qin Mo's gaze darkened. After the bullet brushed past his ear, he seemed to have woken up again. He lifted his head and said, Chinese soldiers. The words were like blood that flowed into his heart. This made Prince stand up abruptly. He caught the gun that Wolf threw over and fired at the mercenary on the right who was trying to approach him. 3 people had already fallen on this side, but the people on the other side were completely unharmed. Kwang watched the scene with a dark expression. Set up the sniper cannon. Yes. Scorpion's eyes flashed. He pushed the person beside him away and placed the long-barrel sniper cannon on his shoulder. A shot like that. As long as it hit the harvester. It wouldn't just be the machine that would explode, the people behind would be blown away as well. But right at this moment, suddenly, a loud buzzing sound came from the sky. In that instant, everyone on the ground looked up at the sky. 1, 2, 3, 4. A total of 18 military fighter jets with the red flag on them rushed out of the spreading clouds, appearing in front of them with an unstoppable aura. This time there was no warning. With the evidence that Qin Mo and his team had gathered, it was enough for them to send their troops across the border. But there was one point. China had to bring Kwang back to decide whether he was dead or alive. If he landed in someone else's hands, no one could be sure if this time would be the same as the previous time. Someone would make use of a deal with the upper class to bring Kwang back. Judging from the events that had happened before, There was a problem with the MT government. That was why Kawang had been so arrogant for so long. The moment he pointed at the military council, it was like a flood. But there wasn't a hint of panic on Kawang's face. They don't dare to move, there are so many bombs buried here. If they throw a bomb, we won't be the only ones dying. Indeed, the military planes couldn't strafe. Scorpion lifted his lips, raising the sniper cannon and firing at the wings in the sky. Bang! One of the military planes suffered damage, losing its balance. Chapter 1260. Kawang's words caused strategist's heart to skip a beat. He turned back abruptly. Due to his boss's posture, he couldn't see his expression at all. But he felt an inexplicable sense of unease. He couldn't describe the uneasiness he felt. Just his posture was enough to send a chill down strategist's spine. Qin Imo stood there with a gun in his hand, as though the changes around him didn't affect him at all. But strategist knew something wasn't right. Boss shouldn't be like this. Kawang must have sensed the problem before him. That was indeed the case. The more he looked at Qin Imo, the wider the smile on Kawang's face. It wasn't easy for us to meet and we have to separate immediately. Actually, I really want to sit down and have a good talk with you about the topic I was talking about. I believe that after today you will have a different opinion. Kawang glanced at the watch on his wrist. It's about time. Scorpion will stay behind to play with you guys. See you later. With that, he gestured to the mercenaries. Immediately, someone started the speedboat parked on the lake. Everyone on the mission knew they couldn't let Kawang leave this place. Once he entered Country T and was caught, he would be out of China's interrogation range. But the firepower on the ground was too strong and the military planes couldn't open fire due to the bombs buried in the ground. Once they got close, their wings would be shot off. Almost everyone tightened their grip on this point. Qin Imo still stood there, his eyes reflecting Kawang's back view. The white coat of the doctor overlapped with the image in his memory, causing his gaze to darken. Wolf watched as his boss strolled out. He turned, immediately thinking of a way to cover himself. Qin Imo moved quickly, his entire body exuding a cold aura. Just as the mercenary raised his hand to kill him, a card shot out faster than a bullet. A card that was faster than a bullet burst out in an instant and stabbed straight into his forehead. The card was Qin Imo, but the way he killed him was like magic. Before anyone realized it, their skin had already been scratched by the cards. At this moment, Kawang was preparing to board the boat. He turned back and glanced at the figure following them. He seemed to be in a hurry, but surprisingly he didn't ask anyone to stop Qin Imo. Instead, it seemed like she was purposely making him follow her. She heard someone calling Boss Qin. Kawang narrowed his eyes. Let Scorpion destroy the harvester first, it's annoying for the people behind. Come on, Qin Imo, wait a little longer. You will be my most successful masterpiece. He believed that at that time. You will be willing to call me teacher. Kawang smiled as he stepped onto the boat. The mercenary stood on the shore. His figure was very familiar. He took the earpiece and said, King wants you to get rid of the special forces on the land first. Scorpion smiled and adjusted the aim of the sniper rifle. I'll take care of it now. On the other side, Prince glanced sideways and sensed the other party's intention. He wanted to push Wolf, who was the closest to him, away. The corner of Scorpion's mouth curled deeper and deeper, his killing intent filling the sky. All of you die. Just as his finger was about to pull the trigger, a voice rang out. Bang! A fierce gunshot rang out from an unknown place. Chapter 1261. D***, there's a sniper. In an instant, all the mercenaries were in chaos. Blood splattered everywhere. Scorpion didn't even know how he died. He was already lying on the ground with his cannon. But that wasn't the end. At the highest point of the flower field, a slender figure was lying on the ground, with a rifle resting on her shoulder. The hair on her forehead fell down, revealing only a pair of eyes. Her breathing was slow, but the speed at which she fired the gun was shockingly fast. She locked onto him accurately. It was a clean shot. Bang! Another gunshot rang out. Before the mercenaries could even react, Xian had already taken out his cannon. The military aircraft in midair had already found an opportunity to descend. Prince, who had been prepared to die, widened his eyes. He glanced at his back before glancing up in disbelief. Someone is helping us? Could it be someone from the same industry that Kawang didn't eliminate? That's not possible. Strategist had received the information. According to what he knew, All the spies here had been locked up by Kawang. But how could he explain the 2 gunshots? Fatty, who had landed with the military aircraft, had had this question when he had received the red dot signal. After hearing the 2 gunshots, he was even more certain of his suspicions. There was someone else here besides his boss. But who could that person be? Forgive Fatty for his low intellect, he couldn't figure it out. But it was undeniable that the situation had changed because of the sniper's hidden shot. If the first military aircraft could descend, the second one would be able to as well. The mercenaries had started to change their tactics from their frenzied shooting. This was because they knew very well that once these military aircraft were given a chance to land, these Wuxia soldiers would give them a thorough and painful blow. The 2 gunshots were the ones that had caused this opening. The sky was filled with military green, occupying every spot. Prince managed to snatch a gun that belonged to him. His figure was like a dragon as he weaved through the crowd. His combat skills were finally on full display. When he lifted his lids, he glanced towards the flower field. The figure was gone. Where did it go? Prince was still curious about who had saved them. On the other side, Kawang sensed the change in the situation. His eyes dimmed and his fingers tightened. He wasn't as calm as before. Instead, he was furious. Set sail. Yes. The person in charge of the rudder started the ship. 3 mercenaries stood at the bow and were pushing. Looking at the speedboat cutting through the water. Kawang slowly released his grip. But before the corners of his mouth curled up, 2 poker cards took the lives of 2 of his men. It was Chinemo. At this time he had already wiped off the disguise on his face. Dressed in a black windbreaker, he looked like a demon from hell. Coupled with the flames behind him and the poker cards revolving around his palm, he gave off a dangerous aura that could destroy the heavens and extinguish the earth. The big mercenary obviously took a step back. The speedboat sped up. Chinemo stepped on the corpses by the river and leaped onto the front of the boat. Kawang stood at the cabin. When he looked at the hair hanging down his forehead, he smiled deeply. Is it painful? Chinemo, you are my student. In terms of psychological research, I won't lose to you. So stop struggling. Look at this lake, isn't it similar to the one you saw previously? Speaking of which, you can't protect the person you like because of your responsibilities. Do you still remember our lesson? Humans are selfish. If you aren't selfish, you won't be able to protect the person you want to protect. In this world, there will always be people who don't follow the bottom line. Do you want to know how I discovered the identity of your little lover? She was probably influenced by you. She actually wanted to save one of my believers. It's a pity that believer of mine doesn't care about anything as long as she can be noticed. It wasn't easy to choose her. Don't you people in China pay attention to small things? When I found out that she stood on the side of the plagiarist and didn't care about who was the original author, she even posted a long post to prove how smart she was, I locked onto her as my believer. As expected, as long as you give her a chance to stand in front of everyone, she will do anything, including betraying the person who thought she was bullied and wanted to protect her. That person is you, the one who tried so hard to sneak into the school to deal with me. It's a pity. From a certain perspective, I admire her. For example, the way she struggled to survive in the pond. This was a further hint. If Chinemo was clear-headed, he would definitely know and eliminate it immediately. But now, Chinemo wasn't clear-headed. In fact, the moment he saw the youngster in the video take the cup of water, his mental defenses were already starting to crumble. But at that moment, there was a belief that supported him. That belief was to complete the mission. Kawang would probably never understand. To a soldier in China, especially to someone like Chinemo, what did belief mean? It meant that even if the hypnosis was activated, he wouldn't give up. Kawang could see the change in Chinmo's emotions. The hand hanging by his side clenched tighter. The happier Kawang was. Now the boat was a distance away from the riverbank. He believed that no one would be able to catch up to them. Similarly, he believed Chinemo wouldn't attack him again. As long as he continued to guide this person who had completely lost his mind, then he would be able to use his sharpness. Kawang had waited for this day for a long time. He couldn't control his excitement at the thought of being able to use Chinemo. It was obvious from Kawang's state. He tried hard to control his emotions, wanting to slow down his tone so that he could carry out the hypnosis better. Think about it, are those people worth saving? Other than making you lose the most important person in your life, what else did they bring you? Chinemo, you can totally change your way of living. You are the chosen one, why did you have to choose such a difficult path? As long as you let go of the unnecessary perseverance in your heart, the person you love won't leave you. I know you want revenge now. Those people who made you lose her, every single one of them is trash. What's wrong with getting rid of these trash? You should kill all of them, isn't that right? Chapter 1262. Her deep voice was like the water in the lake, drowning all of Qin Mo's senses. The speed of her speech, the tone of her voice and the content she was feeding him. Kawang was using a targeted hypnosis. He watched as the tall and straight figure stood in front of him. He paused, reaching out to press down on his head. On the other side, after firing the 2 shots, Bo Jiu leaped up from the flower field. She realized that Qin Mo had boarded the speedboat. The only way she could catch up to him was to hide her Lamborghini 600 meters away. But it wasn't possible for her to not be discovered, even when she flew past him. When Prince saw the familiar figure, he couldn't help pausing. Little Black. It's really Little Black. The next second he saw her clothes and the rifle in her hands. He recalled her previous position. His eyes widened. It's Little Black, the one who helped us just now was Little Black. Doctor saw Bo Jiu's face. The youngster's face had probably been rubbed against the bushes, her disguise gone. Her cold face looked especially pleasantly surprised at this moment. They hadn't expected it. Bo Jiu was the one who had been helping them. Fatty was the most shocked among them. He opened his mouth and shouted, "Big Spade." That explained why he had received the red dot's location. It was because of her. She was actually here. Fatty couldn't tell what he was feeling because he couldn't find a second person who would enter the tiger's den alone to save the boss and turn the situation around with his own strength. This reminded him of the days in Supreme Alliance. He had seen her shoulder the heavy burden and lead Supreme Alliance out of the encirclement. But, however, such a person might not be able to return to the esports arena. But even so, she had still appeared here. She could have stayed out of trouble. Both her and their boss. But they had still come to the most dangerous place. Because they had to save these people. Fatty wasn't afraid of anything. He was most afraid of not being able to make it in time. Doctor was the same. Hence, when he saw the youngster's face, his first reaction was to shout towards the lake. "Boss, the most important person to you is still alive." It was useless. The speedboat was already quite far away. Now they could only vaguely see that they had stopped there. As for what exactly happened, no one knew. Swoosh. Bo Jiu lifted the banana leaf that was blocking the Lamborghini. Voice recognition unlock. The car door opened with a snap. The navigation system began operating. Originally, Little Black wanted to tease its master humorously. "I'm done changing the diving mode, I'll be right back." Entering diving mode. The navigation system fluctuated. "The fuel is not full. Master, please be careful. We might not be able to return." Bo Jiu reached out to block the water goggles. "Ignore it." "Yes." When Little Black heard this, he knew that his master had lost his usual composure. Otherwise, he wouldn't have set off so recklessly without considering the amount of fuel. Not only that, there was also the look on her face when she held the steering wheel and dived into the water. It wasn't like her at all, but it made one's heart ache. Little Black heard her voice. There was a rare sense of urgency. She said, "Brother Mo, wait a little longer. I'll be there soon." Little Black did not understand human emotions. Just knew how to look. If there was a person he would really like that person too much. His greatest fear would be losing them. On the lake in the cabin. Kawang took another step forward, his gaze landing on Qin Mo's lifeless eyes. "I have a remote control here. As long as you press the red button, you will be able to eliminate a portion of the people who caused her death. As for the rest, you can take your time to find them." At this moment, Qin Mo seemed to be bewitched, his lifeless eyes looking towards the brightest color. "Come, you are the most qualified person to judge." Kawang was still as refined as ever. After all, the main event was about to begin. As long as he pressed the button, the wooden house not far from the speedboat would be blown away. There were countless bombs buried underneath. The Chinese soldiers who had destroyed his plans and the people who refused to be captured would be buried along with his flower field. Most importantly, the person who would do it was Qin Mo. Just based on this point, he had already won. Yes, from the start, this was Kawang's plan. He didn't care much about his subordinates. Although it would definitely be a little difficult to find some people who were convenient to use. But Qin Mo was enough to exchange for them. With that thought, Kawang's smile deepened. Qin Mo reached out his hand as though he was being commanded. Just as Kawang thought he was going to press the button, there was a swoosh sound. The remote control was thrown into the water. Qin Mo was still standing at his position. The wind from the river blew against his black trench coat, making him look like a vampire about to explode. There was an indescribable evil smile on his lips, as though he was mocking the world with a hint of bloodlust. Kwang's expression changed instantly, because after looking at Qin Mo, he suddenly remembered an article on psychology. Most people would have a natural sense of submission to their psychological mentor when they triggered a psychological cue. But there was a 0.1% of people who, when their beliefs reached a certain level, wouldn't submit to their psychologist. Instead, they would become more and more. Kwang didn't want to continue thinking. He raised his hand, wanting to shoot Qin Mo. Since he couldn't tame someone, he should be killed right here and now. Qin Mo wouldn't give him the chance. In a flash, the poker card in his hand flew out again. This time it was even more murderous than before. When the poker card brushed past his wrist, Kwang missed his aim in pain. The bullet flew past his side, hitting the mercenary who wanted to stop Qin Mo. Kwang's eyes widened. He knew how powerful Qin Mo was, but he didn't know where his bottom line was. But this time he saw it. At the same time he also saw the true hell. At this moment, Qin Mo didn't have any reservations. Because he didn't have any reservations, there was only one thought left in his mind. Go. Kill them all. Especially this person. Many people had said that young Master Qin's hands looked good when he played games and would definitely be more beautiful when he played the piano. But they didn't know that Qin Mo's hands were porcelain white and cold. When he picked up the poker card to kill someone, it could be described as breathtaking. As the prey, Kwang's heart had never raced so fast. In that moment, his eyes were filled with panic. Even the usual gentleness on his face was gone. He pressed down on his hand, wanting to pick up the gun anxiously. Qin Mo walked in front of him. His eyes were as deep as they had been when they first met. But this time the flickering light was a little dark. You're right, they all deserve to die. But the one who deserves to die the most is you, Professor. Qin Mo smiled nonchalantly. When he smiled, there were still traces of blood under his eyes. He was incomparably handsome. You seem to have always wanted to control me. Professor, didn't the documents you studied tell you that when things reach an extreme, they will go in the opposite direction? With that, the poker card in Qin Mo's hand was already pressed against Kwang's neck. I do have some regrets, Kwang said. As Kwang spoke, a blade appeared in his palm. Without waiting for Qin Mo to defend himself, he stabbed the blade towards him. Qin Mo dodged, his long leg kicking him to the side, sending him crashing into the cabin. Kwang's eyes wavered. He had realized his end. If it had been the Qin Mo of the past, he wouldn't have been in this state. But Kwang laughed lowly, black veins seeping out of his eyes. Qin Mo, you have already become another me. Do you think you can leave this battle unscathed? Even if I die, you will lose. You are still the same as when you were a professor. You talk too much. Qin Mo laughed as he lifted him up. His eyes were starting to overflow with red. Since you like water so much, we will do it your way. Tie a heavy object and sink. Don't worry, I won't knock you out. Things like drowning should be slowly enjoyed. Panic was evident on Kwang's face. He would rather Qin Mo raise his hand and shoot him. He had never expected Qin Mo to use such a method. He was awake but couldn't save himself. Was he going to let him have a taste of all the suffering that person had gone through? Kwang wanted to resist. But once he lost the psychological battle, he would no longer have any advantage over Qin Mo. In less than 2 seconds, Kwang realized that something had cut his wrist. Anyone with a little experience would know what it would be like to be thrown into the water after cutting one's wrist. The more he struggled, the faster the blood would flow. Moreover, there was a heavy object tied to Kwang's legs. There was a muffled sound of falling into the water. He didn't even have the chance to surface, unless he bent his body and removed the heavy object from his legs. But just like what had been said, the more he moved his hands in the water, the faster the blood would flow. Moreover, the loss of blood left him with no energy to untie the knot. Actually, all high-level psychologists had learned how to untie knots. This time, Kwang couldn't make it. At the start, he was still struggling. When he couldn't breathe, blood started to spread on the surface of the lake. Gradually, his fingers stopped moving and his whole body sank deeper and deeper. The speedboat had stopped. Qin Mo stood in the cabin, his head throbbing. He took the opportunity to sit down. Blood slowly dyed his eyes. Have you heard of a story? The story went like this. In the Bible, the archangel in charge of the divine world, Michael. He was as noble as snow and had the most beautiful appearance. He was the light of the entire divine world. But no one knew that the archangel had lost all emotions when he was maintaining order in the human world. He sacrificed his flesh and blood to save people time and time again. But when he was attacked by others, he understood that humans were just like that. Because he had seen all the darkness. Regardless of the situation, even if he passed by the shore, his holy battle robe wouldn't be tainted when he was guiding others. Until he met someone. The most rebellious fallen angel, the young Lucifer. Michael's emotions returned. At first he was impatient. Then he wanted to see that person. After all, from the start, that person had provoked him. At that time, Lucifer's devil consciousness hadn't been activated. When he lay in his arms, he was like an obedient little devil. Michael thought that the two of them would be together for a long time. Until the divine world received a letter from the human world and launched the largest war. His most beloved Lucifer walked out of the raging fire and was burned beyond recognition. From then on, when Michael waved the sword in his hand, there was only coldness. He was in a high position. He killed people like flies. And now, Chinamo was like Michael. Under the dim yellow light. He was half lying in the cabin as if he didn't care how much blood was on his hands. The setting sun dyed his eyes red. Elegant, mysterious, noble, these words still suited him. But anyone who saw him at this time would know. This wasn't the Chinamo they knew. Chinamo tilted his eyes as if he was admiring the approaching night. In this state, he was even more hesitant to move forward like the speedboat with the red flag. At this moment, there were rolling waves. Black bats flew up from the bottom of the lake. A figure jumped onto the speedboat that was stained with blood. People watched from afar. The youngster took off the water shield in front of his forehead. His hair seemed to be dripping water. Major General Chin, who was sitting on the ground, reached out and grabbed his neck. In an instant, almost everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Young Master Tang, who was standing at the front, realized a problem. Chin Mo's hypnosis is complete. The highest order was that once Chinamo got into an uncontrollable state, they had to bring him back and let the higher-ups make a decision. How exactly should they handle the situation? But now they didn't dare to go near him. He was too dangerous. Chinamo watched the youngster in front of him and smiled slowly. That smile was evil and bloodthirsty. A prey that came to your doorstep? Bojio couldn't breathe. Her gaze landed on the pair of completely unfamiliar eyes. Her heart felt as though it was being cut by a knife, but she was smiling. She found it hard to speak. Brother Mo, it's fine that you forgot about me when I was young, but how can you forget about me now that I've grown up? Brother Mo? Chin Mo inched closer to the youngster's face. How can I have such a short brother that can't even lie? In reality, Chin Mo couldn't understand why he released his grip instinctively when he felt a little uncomfortable. It was as though he was possessed. Forget it. The youngster couldn't do anything to him. Anyway, if he dared to move, he could use the poker card to slit his throat. But Chinamo didn't expect that. The moment he released him, the youngster hugged himself. His voice was slightly hoarse. Brother Mo, this time it's my turn to bring you home. Chapter 1263. Go home. Chinamo glanced at the person hugging him, reaching out to lift the youngster's chin. This person was really interesting. Didn't he see the blood on his hands? Still, he didn't see the person who was no longer breathing. There was so much blood. It was obvious he was the killer. The speedboat on the lake. No one dared to approach him. But this youngster came over as though he wasn't afraid of death. What exactly was he trying to do? Chinamo scanned her face before speaking slowly. The people behind you don't seem to have any intention of bringing me home. At this moment, Bojio remained neutral. I'm not on the same side as them, I'm in the underworld. Chin Mo's side profile didn't reveal any emotions. Especially now, he was smiling, the cards in his hands never leaving. It was obvious he didn't believe her. You called me brother just now, are you my younger brother? No. He thought the youngster would admit it. After all, it would lower his mental defenses. Chinamo didn't expect to hear a negative answer. His brows were about to arch. The young man leaned forward and those light-colored lips touched his lips. Chinamo stilled. He could feel the breath on the youngster's body and the slightly chilly softness. There was a tinge of candy spreading from his lips. It was so warm that he didn't push the youngster away immediately. Then he heard the youngster's voice again. I'm your sugar daddy, we're a couple. Chinamo paused for a moment. Her gaze landed on the young man's slightly upturned lips, and she reached out to press his head down. She tilted her body slightly, and her breath blew into the young man's ear. You mean not only did I fall in love with a boy, but I'm also being kept by this boy? Brother Mo Bojio smiled, not denying his words. Instead, she held onto his hand and moved it towards her chest. The softness on his palm made Chinmo's fingers pause, his brows furrowing slightly. A girl? She was so thick-skinned? But the youngster was like a little gangster, completely unaware of her thick skin. She inched closer to the tip of his nose. Your favorite feeling? Interesting. The more Chinmo looked at him, the more interesting he found him. He lifted his eyebrows slowly. Indeed, I don't like those that are too big. Other than being small, you don't have any other good points. Bojio. Why didn't the Almighty forget his venomous tongue even after turning dark? However, when it comes to inspecting goods, I still need to do this to know if it's to my liking. Chinmo reached out and pulled Bojio into his arms. Under the cover of the black trench coat, his hand had already reached under her clothes. It was hard not to like her waistline. It was smooth, porcelain white and delicate, just like a piece of top-grade jade. The moment they touched, Chinmo fell in love with the feeling. His eyes darkened as if he hated the influence this person had on him. Without changing his expression, he reached out and pushed the young man to a safe place. What is it? Bojio blushed. Her ears were burning from the kiss. When Chinmo saw this, he smiled, his eyes filled with danger. Since you are my sugar daddy, shouldn't you be the one to distract the speedboats on the lake? Bojio sensed his resistance towards the military uniform. And in those deep eyes, there was a vicious aura that constantly floated out. It was a completely different emotion. But even so, he was still him. What is it? Chinmo tucked her hair behind her ear and smiled slowly. You don't agree? You said we are lovers but you can't even do this? Bojio looked at him, her eyes clear and intelligent. If that's what you want, I can do it. With that, she turned. She met the eyes of the person standing at the front of the boat without giving any orders. Before Bojio could speak, a voice came from the other side. Chinmo has to go back with us. Someone will handle the rest. This was a direct rejection of everything Bojio wanted to say. Since that was the case, young Master Tang, you should know that I won't hand him over to the military in his current state. Bojio knew that even if she returned with them, the Almighty would receive proper arrangements. But psychologically, or perhaps the outcome would be the same as before. Chinmo wasn't suited to have a military rank anymore. Out of consideration for everyone's safety, they would allow him to return to Jiang City. He had done so many things. He didn't hesitate to give up his favorite esports. He allowed himself to fall into such a predicament once again. In the end, he could only receive such treatment. Because he was no longer the Chinmo of the past. The military wasn't wrong. He was too dangerous now. If Kawang could hypnotize someone in a short period of time. But now he had all the abilities to control people's hearts. Anti-reconnaissance, combat ability, long-range sniping, even the basic reactions of his body. He was incomparably familiar with the military's tactics. Once he turned dark, the military would definitely be wary of him. Other than herself, Bojio didn't trust anyone else. She was afraid. Afraid that they would treat him as a psychopath like Kawang and raise him in a place where he wouldn't have to worry about food or clothing but wouldn't be able to escape. That wasn't her pet. Her pet had been a little prince since he was young. Arrogant, disdainful and righteous. He was the most suitable person to be a god. He should have been spotless. How could she allow them to treat him like a virus and isolate him, regardless of the method? I want to bring him away. Bojio looked at the figure and smiled slowly. If we can't resolve this peacefully, I have other methods. I believe young Master Tang wouldn't want to be my enemy. The figure didn't move, his tone calm. Z, have you ever thought about the consequences of bringing him away? The military will put you on the wanted list, but that isn't important. More importantly, are you sure he doesn't have any ulterior motives? You should be aware of the danger he is in now. Perhaps, the moment you bring him away, he will control you to do whatever he wants. Chinmo smiled. He hadn't expected such a smart person to be in front of him. It seemed like his plan wasn't going to succeed. I can bear any consequences. I've said it before, this time, it's my turn to bring him home. Chinmo trembled when he heard this. He looked at the youngster very slowly. There were other thoughts in his bottomless eyes. This meant that this youngster had known about his plan. That was why she had said, if that's what you want, you can have it. She had clearly sensed that he was up to no good. She had to agree to his request. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference. as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.